Texas Instruments reports huge losses. Sega gets out of the U.S. arcade business. And Nintendo prepares to launch the family computer. These stories and a whole mess more on this episode of the Video Game Newsroom Time Machine.
I've been waiting a long time for a chance to say this. Stop the presses.
Requiescat in pace.
Makes him crazy, man. What is a man?
It's me, Mario.
What a mess.
Get over here!
Please save me.
Welcome back to the Video Game Newsroom Time Machine, the show where we travel back in time to find out what was making headlines in the home computer and video game industries of yesteryear. I'm your host, Carl, and I'm joined again by everybody's favorite co-host, Alex.
Hey,
welcome
hello.
Back.
Good to be back, Carl. Always good to be back.
So, before we turn on the time machine and head back to June of 1983, let's do the obligatory podcast banter. So, what have you been up to lately?
We do this so often anymore. I never have anything to report. I mean, I've just been existing. I guess I'm starting to think about what I'm going to say to the nice people at Dragon Con, because I'm doing a panel there.
Cool. So, what's the official topic of the panel?
It is going to be the 7th guest and the rise of CD-ROM, because it is the 30th anniversary, not to the month, but to the year, the 30th anniversary of 7th guest. So
very, very cool. So that'll be actually an interesting one, because 7th guest is one of those, I remember the hype for that so much and the disappointment upon actually playing it. But,
yeah.
But it was really a standard bearer. I mean, in so many ways, it almost felt like a precursor to Myst.
Yeah, and they came out at about the same time, though, of course, Myst was only on Mac at the beginning, not on PC. But, yeah, I mean, those two games together really kind of launched the so-called Sillywood era and also supercharged a CD-ROM market that had been struggling to manifest. So it really is a milestone. And Myst gets talked about a lot more than 7th Guest does, which is why we chose to target. I say we because my co-host at They Create Worlds, Jeffrey Dahm, will be joining me in this talk.
Oh, cool.
We wanted to choose the one that was a little less talked about. And it should be a good time. It's going to be, unless the schedule has to change for some reason, that's going to be Sunday at 2:30 p.m. at Dragon Con.
Very cool. Are you going to be recording it and releasing it as an app?
No, I don't think it'll be recorded by the con, because they only record the big rooms. And I don't know that we'll be recording it. And it won't really be an episode. I think we're going to do a 7th guest episode at about the same time. But the thing is, a Dragon Con panel is please keep it to 50 minutes, including times for questions. That is not a They Create Worlds episode. That is like the preamble to a They Create Worlds episode.
Oh, come on. This is the perfect opportunity to set up, a tripod with an old cell phone. You record the video, and this becomes a Patreon exclusive. You have to be thinking in those terms.
That's true. That it could be a Patreon exclusive kind of deal, but it would not be an episode. However, since we're going to be doing all of this research anyway, we are planning to also do a 7th guest episode, which we haven't done yet, to release probably on the 15th of September, the first episode after the Dragon Con.
Excellent. And the part 2 of your Will Wright episodes, just listened to that the other day. That was phenomenal.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, the development of Spore, that I was always wondering exactly what went wrong there. And, I always kind of guessed it was EA that screwed the pooch on that one, but your explanation actually makes a lot more sense. So,
yeah.
And I'm not going to spoil that for anybody. If you're not listening to They Create Worlds, what's wrong with you? Please, don't do that right now.
But Well, maybe listen to this first, Carl, and then go, right? I mean, you're supposed to. I appreciate the vote of confidence,
voice,
but
they already are listening. It's kind of like I can sell you on another show since you're already here.
But I will.
And you saw how long this one is going to be, and you still downloaded and listened this far. I've already got you.
Well, two things. First of all, I'm just going to say one thing that I'll just say generally without giving away sports specifically. EA gets a lot of bad press, but mostly what happens with the studios that fail at EA, this isn't always true, but most of the time, it's not so much that EA interfered, it's that EA gave the people enough rope to hang themselves. And that tends to be more of the theme. But the other thing I was going to say is, I almost feel like we can't even do this as a real episode because there's just so much. And Fallout Boy just released a kind of unfortunate, in my opinion, update to We Didn't Start the Fire, covering everything from 1989 to the present. It almost feels like we need to do this we didn't start the fire style, like Nintendo hunts down Donkey Kong, Valley sees their profits plunge, Konami opens US office, Sente writes, and just and not even explain any of it, but just go straight through all the headlines with a chorus.
Yeah, actually, that would be pretty cool. Considering that I just did a parody for an upcoming special that was a parody of American Pie about the arcade crash. This will be great. Yeah. So, but yeah, there is a lot to get through today, so we probably need to start doing that now.
This banter is over.
It is over. So everybody, remember, you can follow us on the socials. All the links are down below. And you can also become a member of the Patreon. $1 a month gets you early access to the interviews, but also gets you the wonderful bonus of video versions of our next segment, the 7 Minutes in Heaven, where we make, invite, force, compel, whatever verb you want to use here, our intrepid co-host to play a game.
I was told he would kill my entire family if I didn't do this.
Okay, there goes the niece. No, okay. No, okay. Wow, this is just getting dark. I really shouldn't be recording these this late. Okay, so our intrepid co-host has to play a game that was reviewed in a publication dated June of 1983. Remember, when we're doing our time jump, it's always about the publication dates. Obviously, everything happened at some time before that. It's a framing device, people. Don't send me letters. You can send me letters. Emails down below. We love letters. Send them to me. I respond to everything except all those people who want me to invest in something in Kenya. But everybody else, send me letters, send me questions, comments, whatever. Glad to hear it all. And also, the thumbs up on the apps or something. I don't know. So, with that being said, we had a lot of interesting games this month. We had the very first edition of Microsoft's Flight Simulator for the PC. We had Gyrus in the arcade, one of my all-time favorites. I love that game.
It's a good game. I played that one.
Oh, yeah. I mean, played it on the C64, played it on the emulators, played it in the arcade. It's great. We had E.T. Phone Home, the Atari 8-bit computer game, which is a very different experience from the Atari 2600 one. We had Star Trek in the arcades, Congo Bongo in the arcades, Laserian for the Commodore 64, one of the all-time classics published by Commodore itself, Miner 2049er, the EA launch game Hard Hat Mac. But you decided to go with something that your love of this franchise goes way back. And so you went with a wonderful example of early shovelware, G.I.Joe Cobra Strike on the 2600.
I did. And
so are you ready for your 7 minutes in heaven?
Yo, Joe.
Wow, this time we're not even faking that that this is going to be possibly good. Okay, everybody. See you on the other side.
In each of us, there is both good guy and bad guy. In the G.I. Joe video game, you can be G.I. Joe, fighting for right and justice. Or the supervillain Cobra, battling other players with laser blast and venom bombs. You can defend, attack, save, destroy. Play the courageous hero or the unspeakable villain. The choice is yours. G.I. Joe, new from Parker Brothers.
Welcome back, Alex, from your 7 minutes in heaven. So, for the uninitiated, how would you describe G.I. Joe Cobra Strike based off your 7 minutes with the game?
Well, let me just put it this way. If this is the best plan that America's highly trained special mission force could come up with to carry out its mission to defeat Cobra, I, for one, welcome our new Cobra overlords and remind them that as a mildly, barely well-known podcast personality, I can be of great use to them in convincing my fellow citizens to slave in their Cobra minds.
You mean we're all going to fall prey at this point is really what you're talking about.
We are, yeah. It's bad. We have a long episode, so we don't need to belabor it. But should you play this game? No. And were you not listening? No.
Okay, yeah. I guess very, very quickly, there's a giant Cobra at the top because that's what Cobra is in the G.I. Joe Real American Hero series. And for those who aren't old enough to remember this, just look it up. That's not what it was. And it's shooting people, raw recruits, joining the G.I. Joe system who are just running from one house to the other. And there's a magic shield above them that's trying to stop the Cobra from killing them. And there's...
the theme song says about G.I. Joe, he never gives up, he stays till the fight's done. But I would not stay until this fight was done. I would just be like, peace, I'm out.
Yeah. Just get the hell out. I mean, any organization that's going to treat you like that probably don't. I mean, it's very clear that whoever was making and designing this had no real idea what the content of this was. They were just handed a couple of leaflets or some basic information, and they just came up with something that they wanted to come up with. Yeah. Oh, and and this is also before the cartoon premieres in September of '83, the first mini-series.
Yes, the comic book has been out, and Sunbow, the same animation studio that did the miniseries and did the television show for the first couple of years through the movie, did some commercials for television that were animated. So there was a little bit of a sense from the comic books and from those animated commercials kind of what the deal with G.I. Joe was, but there hadn't been a lot of marketing done yet. This was very early in the relaunch of G.I. Joe. Yeah.
It was also the beginning of the whole idea of the cross-media promotion and licensing of these characters. But then again, that is something we're going to be talking about more extensively in our time jump today. So let's leave it at that. As you already said, don't bother, drop it, move on. That's the best possible recommendation I would make here as well. So that just means now we have to do one more stop before we turn on the time machine for June of 1983, and that is to check in with our good friend Ethan in the Department of Corrections to find out what I got wrong in our May 1983 jump.
Hello, this is a prepaid collect call from
the Department of Corrections.
This call is subject to recording and monitoring. To accept charges, press 1. You may start the conversation now.
Welcome back, Ethan. So,
Carl.
Before we get started on everything that I got wrong.
Yeah. Everything.
Everything.
Oh, wait, who has penetrated the Department of Corrections? Who is in here?
Oh, you mean what I've smuggled up here in my prison pocket? Hey, Alex, come on out.
That's quite a... Is that a prison pocket of holding? Because, oh my goodness. that should not have
Alex,
worked.
it's actually good that you're here. Because the Alex comment this time relates to something that you in fact did as a result of appearing on the last 1983 May episode of the Video Game Newsroom Time Machine. You actually went and interviewed someone based on the coverage in that episode.
I did. We were talking about Tarney Williams of Sydney/Artec/Distinctive/EA Canada, and talking about how interesting he was. And I mean, I already knew who he was because that's my job. But it got me thinking, I really should interview this guy. And so then I did. True story.
Hooray!
Yay! And this is why I am very, very disappointed that your podcast does not release interview episodes. Just saying. Just saying.
It would be a very different vibe. At least we can say that.
It just means that I have more work, okay? You could really just, get a couple of names off my to-do list if you just released your interviews. I'm just saying. Okay, so enough about that.
Yes, back to the Department of Corrections. Carl, you stand before the eyes of, well, not God, but something, something that you should fear. I don't know what it is.
God. Ethan.
Yes. Okay. That's me. Hi, everybody.
I'm bigger than Jesus. You've heard it here first.
Oh boy. So, we'll start in May 1973. First of all, when you were speaking about Williams getting into the video game industry, Alex said he wasn't quite sure who had developed the game for Williams, but I can say with some evidence that Magnetic Corporation of America, a Massachusetts-based company, did in fact create Paddlewall for Williams. And I've put those links, and you can put them in the show notes.
Excellent. They will be in the show notes.
No, and thank you for pointing that out. I knew there was a company that we were pretty sure did it, but in the moment, I couldn't remember it to say it. So, thank you.
The one company that we're not 100% sure on, well, I mean, there's lots of little companies, but of the bigger companies, Chicago Coin supposedly got theirs from a guy in Australia, but Keith Smith, in fact, tracked down this man and asked him, and he said, I do not recall this. So we're not 100% sure, even though it appeared in court document stuff.
Well, just because people said it in court doesn't necessarily mean it's true, and that's coming from a lawyer.
Oh, boy. And
How about
on
that
early
recent Supreme Court case at the time of this recording where a guy was
How about
cited
we not talk about that?
who had nothing to do with it.
Yes. That was definitely, yes.
Hey,
but
that's
also
never
speaking
stopped
of
zealots before, so, it's all good. Now,
but also speaking of early Pong manufacturers, Alex, it is Foreplay Manufacturing. Thank you very much.
Yes.
You said something different.
I believe you.
You best, because in the Department of Corrections, the word of Ethan is law.
I was probably within a year of tracking down one of the founders of Foreplay, and I am very disappointed. I located him too late. He was in his 90s, and he had an auto shop up in Oregon, car shop, and it was definitely the same guy, 100%. And I think I was just a year or so off by the time I called that number for his auto shop. It didn't connect to anything anymore.
This is the tragedy of being a recent history historian. We could go on about this for hours, but let's not for right now. We're moving forward to May 1983. Carl, it's not recreations, it's recreations.
Of what?
I forget which company you were talking about, but you said something recreations. Like, no, Carl. Recreation.
Oh, okay. So it's the name of the company.
Yes. It was the name of some company. I can't remember what it was.
So then I mispronounced it. Yeah, sorry.
Then you spoke a bit about the Odyssey 4, or maybe the Intellivision 3. I can't remember which, but did you know?
3, probably.
Well, no, but I think it was either one of those two, because I made the note here that they were, in fact, the same system.
The Odyssey
the Odyssey 4. They were making the Odyssey 3. That was a separate project, but they decided to go to Mattel and try and merge their plans together. For the Odyssey 4 was also going to be the Intellivision 3. It's not 100% sure how that would have worked out, but we have documentation that this was going to be the case.
That sounds very much like a Sears Kmart merger, you know. Hey, we're both screwed. Let's try to do something together.
At least we won't die alone.
Also, speaking of Magnavox woes, Carl, patents in the U.S. have never lasted 25 years. Even now. They do not last 25 years.
Well, you said they don't last 25. No, and I should know.
It's 20.
Is it 20?
Currently.
20, yeah.
Yes.
I misspoke. And I actually teach a unit on that in 2 classes. This is why I have notes when I teach people.
And you have many students that go into intellectual property law?
Your Honor, it's still on for another 3 years.
Hey, as long as they're not using ChatGPT to write their briefs.
Man, the legal profession is quite something right now. But
yes.
Final thing, another off-timing thing as usual. You were in May 1983, you were more than 5 years away from EA getting on the Genesis. It's more like 7 years away.
Well, they get on the Genesis in 1990, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Or is it well, when did they do the reverse engineering? In 89 for release?
It was
90?
through 89, but they revealed their first stuff, I believe, at Winter CES in 1990, and then they sign on with Sega.
Okay, cool.
And that will be all for the May 1983 episode. You are both free to leave. Alex, get back in the pocket.
but it's scary in the pocket.
Back in the pocket.
I don't think I'm alone in there.
Back in the pocket.
All right, Carl. To quote a great colleague of mine when I was a criminal defense attorney, he once told the jury, "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, the human anal cavity is not a clown car." I'll leave it at that. It was one of the best defenses that never worked, ever.
Love it. All right. I'll see you all next time.
As always, Ethan, thank you for your service.
Absolutely. I'm glad as I said in the segment, I'm glad that he pointed out Magnetic Corporation of America, because I was thinking, I think that's who it was that we think it is, but I don't want to say it because then I'll be corrected. But thankfully, the Department of Corrections is also the Department of Filling in Omissions, and so that was a nice piece of trivia to get in there.
Yes, very important to fill it all out. We are here to give as historically accurate a portrayal as we can, and we always thank Ethan for his contribution. So, with that being said, no further ado, we are going to turn on the time machine, and well, we're not heading back 30 years yet, or 40 years. That's really late. Okay, before we can head back 40 years to 1983, we have to turn back the time machine even further, namely 70 years to June of 1953. And we don't have a sound effect for this one, so, let's see. Wait, what was a big hit in top hit music June 1953? Let's see, what was playing? You're cheating hard. Joni James. Okay. Oh, yeah, it's the Hank Williams song, but covered by someone named Joni James. So, okay, that's as far as I'm going to get with those lyrics. What's our first story? Our only story.
Doriot predicts the automated office.
Harvard business professor Georges F. Doriot has published a new book called The Automatic Office, in which he ponders the idea of the office of the future where computers have replaced clerks. He recognizes that the machines of 1953 have a long way to go, but that the potential is there. Yeah, and Doriot is a very important figure in all of this. Number one, he teaches a class at Harvard that has the students try to create practical concepts for manufacturing. It's a manufacturing course. A lot of big important papers that help industrialize things like laser technology and so forth comes out of there. This is actually... And I couldn't find an exact source on this, but there was a student who handed in a paper called The Automatic Office. So this is probably a continuation of that work. Unfortunately, the gent who wrote that just passed away a couple of years ago. I couldn't contact him anymore about it. And but Doriot is mainly important for our purposes, and we'll probably talk about him at some point later on, but he's going to leave Harvard a few years later, and he's going to found one of the first two venture capital firms. So there's a dispute apparently about which one was founded first, but he's going to found American Research and Capital Corporation, and basically he's going to be considered by many to be the founder of venture capital. So...
Mm-hmm. And the most important company they ever backed was the Digital Equipment Corporation, DEC.
Minor player in this whole thing. Yeah, we've talked about DEC many, many times. So, yeah, Doriot, very important person, and it's interesting to see, him actually publishing something about this at this point.
Though it is interesting just to note that when he did back Digital Equipment Corporation, the reason that they were called DEC and not Digital Computer Corporation is even at that point, Doriot did not think the computer revolution was quite there yet, and he refused to back DEC if they were going to focus on computers. And it was only after their original business, because the founders of DEC wanted to be in computers, and it was only after their original business of test equipment did much, much better than expected in its first few years and brought in obscene profits that he agreed to let them spend some of those profits on a computer project.
Interesting. So no matter how revolutionary you are, there's going to be a blind spot. Very cool. Okay, let's move forward then 10 years to June of 1963. And I really should have done this ahead of time. Let's see, what was a
Where's
big
the fun
song?
in
that? Oh my goodness, I don't recognize any of these.
What songs?
One Fine Day by the Chiffons.
One fine day, you da 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 da. One fine day.
Oh, now I get it. Yeah, okay, now I recognize it. Okay, cool. Sold. We're using that.
DMCA strike, DMCA strike.
Don't stroke your ego that much. Okay, now. What's our headline?
Corporate espionage at IBM.
The FBI has arrested several former IBM employees after an investigation into the theft of trade secrets and corporate espionage. The object of the theft was IBM's new magnetic disk hard drives, codenamed Merlin. The Merlin drives, later renamed the 3330, would be the first to introduce error correction, massively increasing the reliability of the 100 meg mass storage devices. So, yeah.
There you go.
I just thought it was interesting.
Yep, IBM. Yeah. IBM, of course, were the pioneers in hard drives.
Yeah. Well, and the fact that error correction was already implemented, and when they said 100 megs, I was like, damn, 100 megs in 1963? Was there 100 megs?
And it was probably a stack. And it was probably a stack of platters like 3 feet high. I mean, I don't know. I'd have to see a picture of it. But
there's a picture. Remember, everybody, links to all the articles and sources. There is a picture in one of the links, and it's basically it's a big platter. It's not as tall as a human being, but it's a big a series of platters. So,
absolutely. Yes, before the internet was a series of tubes, it was a series of platters.
There you go.
Moving on.
Okay, let's now, the main event. We're turning on the time machine. We're going back 40 years to June of 1983.
Business has dropped in half over the past
1983.
Certain
types of games. Business is like sex.
Crazed at its peak.
Welcome back to June of 1983. Alex, what's our first story?
Well, I just want to say, technically, we jumped forward 20 years, not backwards 40 years.
That's true.
Unless we made very inefficient use of our plutonium and jumped from 1963 all the way back to 2023, just so we could jump back to 1983
Well,
again.
considering that we started in 2023, we obviously have a Mr. Fusion. So, we're not using plutonium anymore. That's the technology we have here that we had in 2023.
Fair enough. But yes, our first headline, Nintendo hunts down pirates.
Giving a preview of their legal bellicosity to come, Nintendo has intensified their war against piracy. In 1 month alone, they have filed suit against 300 defendants, ranging from copiers, distributors, and even operators of unlawful copies of Donkey Kong, Donkey Kong Jr., and Popeye in Massachusetts, California, and Michigan. Nintendo promises to keep up the heat on pirates.
Yep. This was all Howard Lincoln. This is how he made his bones with the company, was being their bulldog going after these guys. And we don't have to go into the details because I know we've talked gray markets and parallel importing a lot, but that's what we're talking about when we talk pirates in this context, because it's the arcades. It's the people that are importing parallel imports, selling parallel imports, and operating parallel imports for the most part.
Yeah. And I mean, there's, if you read the trade publications, in this month especially, Playmeter has a couple of nasty letters from operators complaining that, Nintendo shouldn't be coming after us. They should just, make better games or make them available more quickly or whatever the case may be. But then again, everybody in the arcade business is hurting really, really badly at this point. Yeah. So they're just lashing out, it feels like.
Exactly. And let me tell you, though, those operators sound just like 12-year-olds in their parents' basement with PC games.
Yeah, I mean, hey, what, you expect me to buy all of my machines from you? How am I going to get all the new games? I want to play all the new games, even if they stop being fun after just 2 days. I still need the new games. Wow. That was me.
Absolutely.
Back at that age. Okay. If you guys speak Spanish, if you do speak Spanish, check out the latest episode of Modo Historia. It's all about piracy in South America and Spain. Absolutely amazing. And I may or may not be showing up in an episode very soon about that topic. So, okay.
Nice. But Nintendo's not the only people going after others out there these days, because the FTC goes after Liesure Time.
The U.S. Justice Department has filed suit against defunct Liesure Time Electronics and its principals Eugene Hill, Joseph Cassiope, and William Thompson for violating FTC regulations governing the sale of business opportunities and franchises. The expectation of recovering anything for victims of the Blue Sky BizOps salespeople, who we have talked about several times on the show and were the subject of TV news program investigations, are slim at best, but could lead to legal prohibitions for the principals of the company from engaging in these activities, and also put an end to their other companies such as Fascination and Challenge Electronics.
I just hope this doesn't go poorly for my friend Jeffrey and his Big Jeffrey's Cocktail Pong Emporium.
Something tells me that he's too small of an operator for. As long as the news cameras don't show up, he'll be okay.
Yeah, but I mean, these are all symptoms of the same problem. I know we've talked about them before, so we don't have to go into detail, but it's all symptoms of the same problem, which is that the market got so big so fast that nobody figured out how to regulate it until the market was already falling apart, and then people started regulating it too late.
Oh, definitely. And also, you also have to remember, so many people desperate for, the get rich quick schemes, because these are times of very, very bad economic downturn in the United States. I mean, there's going to be some massive government borrowing here pretty soon that's going to help boost the economy a bit. But a lot of people were hurting. This was full-blown recession time.
Exactly. And arcade games, coin-op games, were seen as a tangible investment because, it's full-on recessionary times. They're only just starting to get inflation under control, which is what led to the recession. But it was a good thing in the long run. So the idea of having something tangible to invest in made a lot of sense. And that's how these BizOp people would present it. They wouldn't mention the fact that, oh, by the way, a hit game these days is only a hit for about 2 months, and that's only in the best locations, which you're not going to get through us. And, I hope you know how to service a video game because we're not helping with that either. We're giving you a manual, I guess. But it's a mess. But people are desperate, as you said, and that's when you see these kinds of schemes, is when you've got something that takes off like a rocket, so nobody understands it, but people are desperate enough to give it a try anyway.
Exactly. Yes, you gotta love the desperation of human beings, and the people who will take.
But meanwhile. Exactly. But meanwhile, while all the poor conned people are just getting in, Sega gets out of arcade biz.
Sega has decided to give up its arcade operations. Its 13 Sega Center family...
You need to start that one over. Sorry, because it's U.S. arcade operations, and that is important because there are operations in Japan too.
Sega has decided to give up its U.S. arcade operations. Its 13 Sega Center family amusement arcades have been sold to Time Out, a national chain of now 82 store arcade operations.
Yep. So this is part of the long process, and actually my podcast at the time of this recording, the next one that comes out is going to be talking about this too, because it's about Sega and its relationship with CSK. This is a period of time when Gulf and Western, which is the owner of Sega, is deconglomerating in general, because the markets that made conglomerating favorable when Gulf and Western did it in the 60s and 70s, the markets are no longer favorable for that. Charles Bluedorn has just died, and his successors at the company don't care about all of his little conglomerated babies. And so they're just trying to get out of any business they can that they don't see as part of their core business and they don't see as something that's going to drive profit in the future. And of course, at this point, it doesn't look like video games or coin-operated games are going to drive profit in the future. So this is one of several sales that we're going to see over the course of the next year that involve Gulf and Western gradually disassociating itself from all of its Sega Enterprises assets.
And in that light, it makes a lot of sense. And like you said, the conglomerate concept is dying generally in the market. And it's going to be, and I mean, Sega's shift into consoles is obviously going to make that a lot easier. But yes, the complicated history of the Sega name on a corporation is something that you've covered previously on episodes, and is probably worth another 3 or 4 episodes to just try to untangle it, because, I mean, this Sega is going to be the same Sega that releases the Master System, but is it the same one that's still around for the Genesis, or does it get, when they sell it off,
no,
does it get reinvented?
So now we've got so much to cover, so I'll make this brief. Yeah. Sega right now is Sega Enterprises Incorporated, which is an American corporation. It was a repurposed American corporation. It was a cosmetics company called the Polly Bergen Company that Gulf and Western turned into a shell company, sold off its cosmetics business, and transformed into Sega Enterprises Incorporated.
Okay.
One of the subsidiaries of Sega Enterprises Incorporated is Sega Enterprises Limited. Sega Enterprises Limited is the Japanese company.
Gotcha.
That was sold to Gulf and Western in 1969 and is now a subsidiary of this Sega Enterprises Incorporated. When all of this dust settles, all of the various American operations of Sega Enterprises Incorporated will either be sold off or wound up. Whereas Sega Enterprises Limited, the Japanese company, will be purchased by CSK Corporation. And that's the same Sega that technically still exists today as a subsidiary of Sega Sammy.
Gotcha.
So, like, Sega Enterprises Limited in Japan existed this whole time, but when we talk about Sega as a worldwide organization in this period, we're talking about Sega Enterprises Incorporated.
Gotcha. Okay. That was brief enough. Let's move on to another company with an interesting history.
Exactly. Yes, we're gonna have a couple in a row here. A little more disaster coming. Bally profits plunge.
Bally Manufacturing Corporation has reported that the first quarter of 1983 saw revenues drop from $248 million in 1982 to just $198 million in 1983. And net income for the period dropped from $17 million to just $2 million. The sluggish coin-op business, including both their manufacturing of games and Aladdin's Castle chain of arcades, is largely to blame. These losses were after offsets from a particularly strong showing by Bally's Atlantic City Casino.
That won't last. But yeah, I mean, this is, in 1982, they had kind of the last truly massive hit in the United States, Ms. Pac-Man. And so, I mean, with the market slowing, they just, even though they had some reasonably successful games in late 82, early 83, at this point, it's not gonna look favorable at all, and they're going to be in trouble, like everybody.
Yeah, and this month, the news also breaks that they've bought what will become Bally Fitness. So they're clearly diversifying and hoping that, they'll ride that fitness wave into some profitability. And, I mean, that is going to work for them to a certain extent for a while.
Yeah, they've got the casinos, and they bought Six Flags, and then they're buying Bally Fitness. They buy into a lottery company. They're trying to diversify, which they were starting to do even before the market turned, because the CEO, Bob Mullane, really wanted them to diversify. But it ended up being like really good that they started diversifying, because even though not all of that stuff panned out, it's the reason that they didn't collapse when this whole video game thing, coin-op thing, went south.
That's true. And we'll talk more about Six Flags in just a few stories, but let's see what the rest of them are doing.
Yeah, but first, let's report some more losses. Williams offsets coin-op losses.
Williams has also shown a massive drop in revenue coming from coin-op, with second quarter revenue for coin-op down 55% compared to the same quarter the previous year. Williams still managed to increase its quarterly net income from $2.6 million to $5 million, mainly through the acquisition of the Sands Hotel and Casino in Atlantic City and licensing its arcade games for handheld, tabletop, and home consoles and computers.
Yeah, there's Atlantic City again.
Yeah.
That's not going to last. Ask Donald Trump about Atlantic City. But, it was still new at this time. It had just been legalized. Gambling had just been legalized in Atlantic City at the end of the 70s. And so this is still virgin territory. And once the excitement and novelty of being able to gamble in Atlantic City wore off, that was the end for that. And Atlantic City properties become black holes for a lot of people. But yeah, I mean, once again, Williams is starting to try to diversify at just the right time as well, because if you're just in coin-op, particularly coin-operated amusements, at this point, you're dead.
Yeah.
is really the moral of the story here. It's falling apart.
Yeah, and doing so quite rapidly.
Yes. But what is a disaster for American companies does turn out to be an opportunity for Japanese companies. And in that vein, in this month, Konami opens U.S. office.
Konami has opened a U.S. office. The company says their primary goal is to have a better rapport with its U.S. clients and to continue to license out its hit games like Time Pilot and Gyrus, which have both been licensed by Century. Century.
So we actually got dinged on Twitter about this when we did our episode on the company. Apparently, the people at the company itself pronounced it Century.
Oh, really?
I know. That's not how I would pronounce it either. But apparently, they pronounced it Century.
Okay, Century it is. As well as work out deals for the licensing of home game rights. And this one, I mean, for me, the interesting part was because obviously they're very big, right? The headline is, no, we're not going to start selling ourselves, U.S. manufacturers. We're still going to license it to you. But the fact that they're going to be working out the home game rights at a time when the home game rights are truly the valuable thing. And they're not going to hand them over like Namco did with Pac-Man to Bally. That for me was like, oh, I see behind the curtain. I know what's coming. And this is, we'll let you guys manufacture those big cabinets and possibly have the inventory you can't sell. But if the game is successful, we're going to make all that sweet, sweet ka-ching on the back end.
Yeah, no, it's really quite savvy, and they invest in Century, whatever you want to call it. They actually start investing in the company, and I wouldn't be surprised that if the market hadn't turned, they might have continued investing in it to the point that they, owned over 50% of it. I mean, it never comes to that, and they quickly divest themselves of a lot of their investment in the company when it's clear that the market is collapsing, and then a couple of years later, they buy a manufacturer of kits called Interlogic to make their new American coin-op base. But we are getting ahead of ourselves there. But I think I think they knew what they were doing in just the way you said, because Konami has always been very savvy on the business end of things.
Oh, definitely. I mean, they kind of got out of games and went back to gambling machines when they thought, investment in these games is too high. But yeah.
Yep. And speaking of those sweet, sweet home rights, Atari gets Sentai rights.
Atari has signed a deal with Pizza Time, giving them home console and computer rights to Pizza Time's new line of self-developed coin-op games to be released under the Sentai branding. And this, of course, brings to a close the lawsuit that we reported on last month, where Atari was suing Nolan Bushnell, CEO of Pizza Time Theater, for his violation of his non-compete clause. And by handing over the home rights to the Sentai games, basically that other lawsuit also disappears.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Now, I mean, Atari doesn't get too much out of it because there aren't that many Sentai games to talk about, but...
Well, and especially not before Atari itself, collapses in various ways.
That's true, too.
Yeah, I mean, I think today probably the most fondly remembered Sentai game is probably Hat Trick, which was actually a pretty neat hockey game. But,
Yeah. No.
Not much comes out of Sentai. No. But Atari has its own coin-op things going on as well, as it always does, because also Atari debuts Star Wars.
With Return of the Jedi taking movie theaters by storm, Atari has debuted their Star Wars arcade game at a special event in Orlando. The game replicates key scenes from the first film and promises to wow gamers, and also promises to be an experience you can't get at home.
Yeah, personal anecdote time. I mean, I'm just a little too young to have actually experienced Star Wars, but it is still one of my earliest and it may be a partially false memory. I mean, I know I saw it when I was really young, but the exact time, place, and manner may be a little bit of a false memory. But I remember seeing one of these in the hotel we stayed in when we were in Tokyo. This would have been 1985, so a couple of years later, And I mean, I was 3, so I wasn't playing it, but I remember it was like the only one there in my memory. I mean, for all I know, it wasn't. But I just, even on a 3-year-old, that big cockpit cabinet made a huge impression, even though I wasn't playing it,
Yeah, and my earliest memory of it, and again, it might be slightly wrong, was that the Chuck E. Cheese I used to go to first had the sit-down Star Trek cabinet, and then at some later visit, that had been replaced with the Star Wars cabinet. Because they were basically the same size, sit-down cabinet. They had very similar-looking graphic styles. And I didn't play it back then. The first time I actually played it was the Parker Brothers Commodore 64 port, which was very similar to the 2600 port. So it wasn't using vector graphics, it was just using sprites. There were 2 ports for the C64. Then later on there was one that actually used... probably getting it wrong. It's not vector graphics. I don't know if it was using vectors or polygons for the C64 version, but whatever the case may be, it felt more 3D, janky as hell, very, very slow. The Parker Brothers version actually played better, but oh well.
Yeah, but this is basically, I can't remember the first video game I truly remember. I mean, I vaguely remember seeing like Pac-Man in a snack bar on base in Korea. Again, this is not in 1980; it's a couple years after the fact. But but this game is one of my very first memories, even though I didn't play it. I do remember. I don't know if I actually sat in it or I just heard it from a distance, but hearing Sir Alec Guinness use the Force Luke and everything, it was incredible for the time. I mean, at least in the mind of a toddler, it was absolutely, breathtaking at the time.
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, that the fact that it had this, those movies were so ingrained in us at that point. I mean, this is the days before everybody having a video cassette player at home and stuff. And yet, I still remember every year, once a year, it came on normal television. This was like the event of the year. You had to stay up to watch this because it was Star Wars. Or if you had HBO, it was on like 4 times a week. And it was like, whoa, you went to the kid who had HBO and you were like, dude, all I have is Showtime at home. I'm watching Blade Runner, but I could be watching Star Wars. That kind of thing. Yeah, it's weird. Okay, but we've got more to cover, so let's keep moving on.
That's right. Dave and Buster's profile.
The Texas arcade scene is home to a new paradigm in adult coin-op entertainment. Dave and Buster's is a massive former warehouse turned into adult arcade with food and alcohol. The usual noise of the games are muted thanks to headphones and good... and food. I wrote good instead of food. Don't do this on your cell phones, people. Okay, and food can be ordered directly at the machines. The location also has pool tables, darts, and other more traditional entertainments.
Yep, for those that don't know, Dave and Buster's goes way back.
Oh, yeah. I mean, we've talked about Dave and Buster's in our 30-year jumps. And even when we used to do 20-year jumps. But yeah, this is the earliest mention I found of Dave and Buster's so far. So, and it's interesting because Replay is really like, ooh, maybe this could be the model that we could use to move forward. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge.
Yep, and, obviously Dave & Buster's, they're just a single location at this time, but they're able to weather all of this because they do have a model. It's not a model that at this time takes off all over the country, but it's a model that lets them keep going and then start expand a little bit, then get bought out by a St. Louis department store and expand a little bit more and then survive the bankruptcy of that St. Louis department store, and they're still here today. I was just in a Dave & Buster's a couple of months ago. It was a volunteer event for Dragon Con volunteers where, they paid for the venue, for a game card and for food and stuff. And, these days it's mostly redemption. That's how they keep it going. But, there's still Dave & Buster's around today, and they still do, okay. Better than any other arcade thing does.
Yeah, if you're going for the adult audience, you can make a lot of, not a lot, but you can still make some scratch off of older games. It doesn't have to be the latest and greatest.
Yeah, well, Dave & Buster's sadly doesn't do retro gaming sections.
Oh, really?
I would appreciate it if they did. No, I think they actually, near as I can tell, both in terms of the products they have on the floor and the other people I saw walking around there, I think they largely cater to like college students these days, people that are just able to start drinking and can go to a place that has some adult trappings to it, but also has some, games. And so it's mostly modern stuff. It's video games of the last 10 or 15 years because so few new coin-op games get released that you keep some around. Yeah. And then it's a lot of redemption games and a lot of novelty games is a lot of what it is anymore, and not really so much the retro thing.
That's terrible.
It is. It's, we went because it was free, but there weren't that many things to hold my interest, quite honestly. It's no Galloping Ghost, let me tell you. And speaking of ghosts, oh my goodness,
transition.
Didn't even plan that. I did not even plan that. Speaking of ghosts, Pac-Man Land coming to Six Flags.
Six Flags Texas has opened a new children's play area called Pac-Man Land, featuring Six Flags parent company Bally's biggest IP, Pac-Man.
Fun trivia fact for those that don't know, Six Flags originated in Texas, and that's the reason for the name, because there were 6 different sovereign nations that over its history controlled the area that is Texas, and that's what the Six Flags are.
Oh, really? That's interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, so for those outside the U.S., Six Flags is a chain of amusement parks, roller coasters and that kind of stuff. Now, the Pac-Man Land, not to be confused with Pac-Land, that's coming later, is basically just some little kiddie rides. There's like a maze, and there's some guy dressed as Pac-Man. I couldn't find a lot of good pictures of the amusements in it, but it's just the little kids section. But hey, why not use the IP, right?
Well, yeah, and it shows how big the IP is at the time. I'm sure it helped that they didn't have to necessarily pay much extra for it, though I'm sure they still had to give something to Namco, even though they were the rights holder in the U.S. to do this. But it's common for amusement parks in the United States to have a young kids area and to have some kind of license. Like when I was a kid, the 2 amusement parks I would go to was Six Flags outside St. Louis and Kings Island when I would visit family in Cincinnati. And in the 80s, early 90s, Six Flags had a Looney Tunes license, and that's what they used for the little kids area. And Kings Island had a Hanna-Barbera license, and that's what they used for their little kids area. Just something recognizable for the kids. And so in this period, video games are hitting... It's kind of weird. Like, video games are hitting pop culture relevance at the exact moment that they're falling apart. Because, like, real mainstream mass market relevance always trails, financial success and niche success by a little bit. And so it just so happens, mainstream success happens right when it's falling apart. We're getting the serials, the television shows, the amusement park rides, and everything, all the mainstream trappings right as it's about to crash.
Yeah, and shh. Now you're spoiling stuff that's coming later. But yes, yeah, it is. The core business of the arcade is dying, but let's face it, it's going to be reborn through all those sales of software versions of this on home computers, right? Right?
Sure.
Yeah.
But meanwhile, But meanwhile, perhaps the arcades will be saved because study sees convergence of video games and simulators.
Oh, you jumped over one.
Oh, you're right. I did.
Yeah, this one's a sort of a throwaway, but it was a follow-up to a story from several months ago.
Yes. But just cut all that. Just speaking of kids' areas in amusement parks, more kiddie stuff coming down the pipe as well, because Kiddie Ride's video car image reveals what it's all about.
So, if you might remember from about 3 or 4 months ago, we did a story. There was there is still a company in the United States called Kiddie Rides, and they make kiddie rides. So when you put a coin in and the horse gallops or whatever. And they had announced that they were going to do a video car. So it was going to be video game plus kiddie ride. But there were no images. I tried to look everywhere. And finally now in one of the magazines and Playmeter, there is an ad and it includes an actual picture of this thing. And it's an F1 race car shaped kiddie ride with a fairly large television screen mounted in front of the kiddie ride, and the game on the screen is basically an overhead racer thing, Spy Hunter style, just vertically scrolling, and you control the car on the road. So, looks interesting. And I just wanted to include this because this thing has been bugging me. And I even sent Kiddie Rides emails asking if they could give me some information about this and got no response. So, I thought, cool, finally got it. So, hey, mystery solved.
All right. That's good on the time machine there.
Yay.
But enough about this kiddie simulation stuff. Let's talk about some more adult simulation stuff as study sees convergence of video games and simulators.
International Resource Development, a Connecticut firm, has released a 159-page study looking at the potential convergence of the military simulation market and video game market. They expect to see the two merge and, according to David Ledecky of IRD, quote, perhaps Army recruiters should visit local video arcades to find the fighter pilots of tomorrow, end quote.
Mr. David Ledecky of IRD knows that the Army doesn't have any fighter pilots, right? Just throwing that out there.
I think that the $1,200 that they're charging for a copy of this report doesn't really, it's yeah.
They're the only branch that doesn't have fighter pilots. You had a 75% chance of naming a branch of the service that had fighter pilots, and you failed.
Yep. So, obviously he's on to something with, a lot of the mechanics and everything, and clearly there is going to be more simulation stuff, but the leaders in that area like Microprose, you're not going to learn how to fly a fighter jet based off of F-15 Strike Eagle, but...
No. But in fact, it's interesting because the convergence actually went in the other direction because with the Cold War ending and all of those fat military contracts drying up at the military simulations companies like General Electric and Evans and Sutherland, they actually went and made deals with companies like Sega and Namco to produce video game technology. And so games like Ridge Racer and Daytona USA were built in part by military defense contractors that specialized in simulations.
And we've talked about this several times on our 30-year jump. We've already just recently talked about how those companies' technologies have been used for that first generation of real proper 3D games. So yeah, it is interesting that, the convergence went that way. And not the other way, but hey, it's, what can you say? If you're going to make it a game, you have to simplify the reality, not, everybody's going to learn how to be a proper fighter pilot to play a video game. That's not going to happen.
Atari tried to adapt Battlezone for the military. It did not go well.
So very true.
But moving on from the arcade, we've got Casio, Bandai, and some little toy company called Nintendo, all preparing console launches.
The Japan Economic Journal, an English-language Japanese news publication, reports that electronics giant Casio will be launching an 8-bit game console in October. The unnamed system will be the PV-1000, and while the journal says that it will also have a keyboard add-on to turn it into a computer, the PV-1000 will be a console, and the PV-2000, also launched in 1983, will be an MSX-like machine that won't be compatible with the 1000. Bandai has entered the market with the Arcadia, which is their licensed version of the Emerson Arcadia, and last but not least is the arcade juggernaut Nintendo, with their family computer, which will also be convertible into a computer system via a keyboard add-on. While both Nintendo and Casio will enter the market at 15,000 yen, the Arcadia is selling already for 19,800.
Can you imagine paying more for an Emerson Arcadia than a Nintendo Entertainment System?
Well, considering that the Arcadia is already on the market, I guess, first mover. Yeah. But hey,
it's an import. I mean, that's the the fact of the matter.
Well, let's keep this in perspective, because now, remember, the exchange rate in 1983, this is before the big jump. The big jump in the value of the yen is already slowly coming about. But in June of 1983, the yen is averaging about 240 yen to the dollar. And that would make the Famicom $62.50, which is cheap, actually, when you think about it. The Arcadia is at $82. And as we reported back in April, the Atari 2800 was launched at 24,800 yen. That's like $100. Yeah. They don't stand a chance. $100 for a 2600? You got to have some big freaking cojones to offer that.
Yep. But no, there's a couple interesting things here. First of all is that the entire Japanese market really was of the opinion at this time that the future was going to be computer console hybrids. Yamauchi at Nintendo was kind of savvy enough to realize that they could probably have just a game system, which is what they released with the family computer. But of course, even here, even though they're releasing it as a pure game system, they're promising an expandability in the future because that's what the market thinks it wants.
Well, just look at the name of it, family computer. He's not calling it family console or family game. It's family computer.
Right. Family cassette vision. Casio is releasing, basically a hybrid, and Takara, Tomy, and Sega have either come to market or are about to come to market with console computer hybrids. And, that's what everyone in Japan thought the future of this business was until the family computer comes out and redefines everything. That's point one. Point two, you have Bandai here that's just throwing everything it can because their relatively new president, Makoto Yamashima, the son of the founder, is very convinced that media and multimedia, manga, film, video games, etc., are going to be very, very important to the future of Bandai's growth out of just being a toy company, because Bandai is a toy company that had kind of gotten big on the back of licensed properties, and they also had some really notable failures in between their notable successes. And Yamashima really wanted to get the company away from having to rely on the success of other people's properties to itself be successful. And so he does a lot of investing in this period in all sorts of other forms of media and entertainment. And this is one of them. So they release in pretty rapid succession the Intellivision, the Arcadia, and the Vectrex. And as he put it in retrospective interviews, he was like, well, there was no real video game market yet, so we were just kind of throwing stuff at the wall to see what stuck, basically. It was licensed stuff, so it was not a big loss to them if it didn't sell, because they were just licensing from American companies. And so this is presaging their big involvement in video games going forward. The final thing I'll say that's interesting is that 15,000 yen price point for the family computer. When Yamauchi told Uemura that he wanted a video game system, he really wanted something that was going to sell for $10,000.
Yeah.
Or yen, sorry, 10,000 yen. And they couldn't get it down to that price point, obviously. They had to sell it for about 15,000 yen instead. But what they did to keep the price as close to 10,000 yen as they could, and the reason why they were able to undersell something like, say, the Arcadia, is that for the first time, they cut the margins on the hardware to almost nothing. They weren't selling it at a loss, but they cut the margins to almost nothing, and they convinced, cajoled, bribed, forced the distributors and retailers to also take a razor-thin margin on the hardware. And that's how they were able to get it to this 15,000, and that is kind of the final evolution of the so-called razor and razor blades business in consoles, because the traditional razor blades business is you give away the razor to sell the blades. But in video games, it had actually been, we're going to make more money on the blades, so we're going to release lots of different blades, but we're also going to make money on the razors. It wasn't actually give away the razors. Atari maintained very high margins on the VCS. They did not give it away to sell more games. Nintendo here, though, for the first time, is saying we are going to give away the console, give away the razor to sell the blades. And so family computer coming in at 15,000 yen here is actually a real milestone, other than just being the birth of Nintendo's console business, not counting the dedicated stuff before that, but also a milestone in video game economics generally. So just thought this would be a cool and appropriate place to point that out.
Oh, definitely, especially given the price information here. And well, next month we will be talking about this in far greater detail.
I think we might be.
But, hey, that's these consoles, the family computer is still in the future.
That's right. We don't have time to pray for the future because we have to fix the problems that are going on in consoles right now. And word on the street is Atari to fix 5200 joysticks.
The analog, non-self-centering nightmare that are the 5200 joysticks will soon be a thing of the past, as Atari has announced that they will be replacing the existing pack-in controllers with new ones that will feature both analog and self-centering, as analog controls apparently work well for some games. The new controllers will be available as separate purchases at some point, but no exchange for those that already have bought the system will be made available.
Yeah, that just shows how desperate a shape Atari is in at this point, because the only logical thing to do in this mess up is to allow free exchanges, but there's no way Atari can afford to give anyone free anything at this point in its history.
And at this point, it's not even going to happen. That's the worst part.
No.
They never fix this problem. The new joysticks never show up. They keep manufacturing these things until 87, when they finally discontinue the 5200 altogether. And it's, I mean, the fact that they shipped it with these joysticks is just so ridiculous to begin with.
It's unbelievable, and we don't know a lot about 5200 development. It's been hard trying to track down anyone who was involved
or who admits
in it.
to being involved in it.
Oh gosh, I have to tell you the saddest story about this. I got all excited because I discovered a definitely 100% on a resume current, because it was a current resume, working email address for Michel Ebertine, the French head of hardware engineering at Atari during this period. And I was all excited because I was like, oh my God, this will be a huge get. Before I contact someone, I always do a little searching around just in case. And I discovered that I want to say 3 or 4 months before I discovered this email address. No, it's worse. He was run over in a Safeway parking lot.
Oh, geez.
It wasn't even. I mean, he was an older guy. I think he was in his early 80s. I think late 70s at the youngest. But it's not even that he died of old age. He was run over in a Safeway parking lot several months before I tracked him down. That one hurt. It didn't hurt me as much as it hurt him, but
yeah, but still, I mean,
that really hurt.
Oh, sorry to hear that.
Because that's someone who could have probably spilled some beans, because he wasn't like the direct, like, I built this, but he was the head of hardware engineering for the consumer division at the time that the 5200 was developed. So, so we don't know a lot. We do know that we do have some market research reports, from Kurt Vindell's collection that shows that they did do market research that indicated that the joysticks were a problem before they launched them. Because Atari did a lot of market research. So it did come up. What they were thinking, I don't know. I mean, obviously it would have been a little more expensive for them to not be self-centering. And if I had to guess, I'd just say they decided, well, yeah, maybe it's a slight problem, but it's a lot more expensive and it'll be fine. Narrator: it wasn't.
I mean, it's such. I've tried to play with them. Oh my God, it's a nightmare.
You cannot play Pac-Man with a floppy joystick.
Nope. But oh well. I'm sure Atari will be doing just fine soon. They'll turn it around.
But meanwhile, as Atari tries to fix itself, its competitors are also trying to make a splash in hardware as Vectrex to show off 3D Imager at CES.
We discussed Vectrex's assertion that they found a way to produce full color on a standard Vectrex a few months ago, and now we know what they meant. The 3D Imager, a pair of goggles that produce a 3D effect by spinning a disc in front of the player's eyes to mask every other screen refresh, of course, is going to be their definition of full color, and it's a little bit questionable at best, as there really is only one color possible on these flashy discs.
I mean, if it was good enough for the Virtual Boy.
Yeah. So the full color is basically just that. Now, they are promising, though, a very good 3D effect, and one of the titles that they're announcing with it is going to be Pole Position, which we've talked about is the hot game in the arcades that's sort of keeping Atari's lights on at this point. But that's not going to get released. And, well, the thing you can say is that this weird flicker thing is going to beat the Master System to the punch, because the Master System is going to be using very similar or the same system a few years later.
Essentially the same system. Yeah, I think it used shutters rather than a spinning disc, but the end result is the same, which is that it's blanking out every other frame to give that 3D effect.
And we talked about how the arcades have done this. Sub-Rock 3D used a similar system. And yeah, so yeah, 3D, it's coming to the Vectrex.
But wait, there's more. Act now, and you can get the Vectrex for the low price of $100 as Vectrex drops below $100.
Wow. During CES, GCE, the company marketing the Vectrex, announced a reduction of its wholesale pricing so that the console can be offered for under $100 at retail.
I'm sure they're making money on that.
Oh, yeah, definitely. I mean, there's no desperation here. You know, you get the monitor, you get the controllers, all for $100. Come on.
Yeah. Good old Milton Bradley ceases to exist because of all of this. Good job, team.
Yeah, you know, sometimes you bite off a little bit more than you can chew, and
but it is not all doom and gloom in the console market, ladies and gentlemen, because ColecoVision sells big post-Christmas.
Arnold Greenberg, president of Coleco, has said that his company shipped as many ColecoVision units during the first quarter of 1983 as the 560,000 units it shipped during 1982. There were also a massive boost in the first quarter of shipments of expansion modules, totaling over 400,000 units. Coleco has also dropped the wholesale price of the system by $20, and expectations are high for the new Atari clone Gemini and the ColecoVision 2 computer expansion module.
Oh, they just had to throw in that last one, didn't they?
Oh, yeah.
They just had to throw in that last one.
Oh,
yeah,
we'll talk more about that one in a bit, but yeah.
Yeah. But first half of 1983 is actually very good for Coleco. Obviously, this is, Coleco saying, "Hey, we're great." But I've seen some newspaper articles from the first half of '83 as well that did comparisons, and according to this, One Tracker's estimates, it's always estimates. They were the top selling system of the first half of 1983. They outsold Atari and Mattel. So
yeah, I mean,
the good times are rolling.
The toy retailer publications, they're also just like, Atari's not moving and television's not moving, but Coleco is still doing fine, And we've talked about this in the last few months, how at least in the toy business, the retailers are already like, Coleco's the system of the future. There's a lot of retailers already like, we're not ordering anything else going forward as far as consoles. It's ColecoVision or bust. So,
absolutely. And in the face of those headwinds, Atari to consolidate console and home computer divisions.
Oh, yeah. Steve Ross, chairman and CEO of Atari parent company Warner Communications, announced plans to consolidate the home console and home computer businesses. This will most likely result in several hundred people being laid off and the discontinuation of most of its current computer line in favor of 4 new models: the 600XL, 800XL, 1400XL, and 1450XL.
Now, I got to take a moment to talk corporate shenanigans here, because that's my thing. And Atari corporate shenanigans, because I've talked to everybody, is really my thing. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what's going on here, because I can. So this was something that was done because as the business was failing, they brought in an outside consulting company to try to fix the business. And of course, the first thing any outside consulting company is going to do is say, well, you need to reorganize your business, because that's the easy one, whether it works or not. So Atari was divided into essentially product units. They had their consumer electronics division, their home computer division, and then Coin-Op, of course. The new setup that they're going to have is they're going to be reorganized into functional units instead. So Coin-Op's still going to be its own thing. They're not touching it. But instead of having separate home computer and console divisions, what divisions they're going to have instead are going to be the Atari Products Corporation, which is responsible for developing all the products. They're going to have the Atari Sales Corporation, which is responsible for selling and marketing all the products. And they're going to have the Atari Manufacturing Corporation that is going to be responsible for manufacturing all the products. And these are all going to be subsidiaries of Atari. They're not splitting Atari into pieces, but they're taking those 2 divisions and dividing their functions across 3 divisions.
This sounds horribly like the beginnings of that very, very nasty 80s love affair with profit centers.
Yeah.
Where now they're each going to send bills to one another. Well, here's your bill for manufacturing. Here's your bill for sales.
I imagine so. I don't know to that level of detail, but that wouldn't surprise me. And this also allowed Steve Ross hated firing people. This is just a fact. He hated firing people, but this also gave Steve Ross a graceful way to move some people around. Because when this kind of musical chairs stops between all of these executives that are high up muckety-mucks in these 2 divisions, Mike Moon, the head of the consumer electronics division, is the odd man out. He doesn't leave the company. He's put in charge of some other areas. He runs international for a bit, and I think there was a period of time where he was involved in some special project, but it basically got him out of the chair of being in charge of the video game business, because there was some belief that while he was a good guy and a smart guy and all of that he was in a bit over his head running an organization this big, because he was not a very detail-oriented individual. And this allowed John Cavalier, who was the person in charge of the home computer division, to be in charge of the Atari Products Company, which was the whole shebang of product development across both console and home computer. And John Cavalier felt really strongly, because I've interviewed him, that the kind of weaknesses that Atari had when he joined were that they needed to get the prices down just generally. He felt they had a price problem. And he also felt that they really needed to have a compatible product line of some sort all the way from the very low end to the very high end. Not that everything would necessarily be 100% compatible, but he wanted there to feel like there was more of a range of product, that there were potential step-up points in. And it feels like giving him control of Atari Products Corporation was in part giving him an opportunity to try to act on this vision he had for the product line, because it's giving him control of console and computer, and rather than having them each develop in a silo, having them develop in somewhat the same ecosystem, and maybe be developed in a way where those two parts of the business consider each other more. As he put it, I mean, he never got a chance to really do anything that he wanted to do with that grand compatibility vision, because, by then the company was falling apart, and he got a call from Steve Jobs, and then he went over to Apple. But that's some of what's going on behind the scenes at this point that is mandating this shift, in addition to the fact that they're just, losing hundreds of millions of dollars. But in addition to that, this is some of the other stuff going on behind the scenes that's leading to this shift. Gotcha.
And I mean, it kind of makes sense. The 600 XL, the 800 XL will both show up. The 1400, 1450, if I remember correctly, will not. There's some interesting notes. Put a link to the AtariMuseum.com where they talk about what these different devices would have or could have been. Obviously, we're also going to get the whole Amiga chipset someplace in the middle of all this is coming as well. And it's just a freaking, I mean, it makes sense to try to create some kind of hierarchy, because now you got the 5200. It's not compatible with the 8-bit system, even though it probably could have or should have been. And obviously the Tremels are going to take that philosophy to a whole new level with their product lines in the coming years. But yeah.
No, this was, I think, John Cavalier's kind of vision, kind of the beginning of it. But then what happens, spoiler for later on, is Ray Kassar is fired, James Morgan is brought in, and James Morgan, whom I've also interviewed, takes one look at the Atari product line and is like, we are getting way too invested in computers. Atari started as a video game company. We need to be in video games. We're going too deep on this computer stuff. And so that's when the computer project starts slowing to the point that they start getting canceled, and all of this is you get a regime change at the very top with a different idea of what Atari should be.
I mean, I don't think he was wrong. And Tremel's shift back to computers is never truly as successful as it should have been. But yeah, it is what it is. And we will follow it and report on it here at the Video Game Newsroom Time Machine over the next couple of years.
Absolutely, we will. In the meantime, though, Atari is getting into some new markets, or at least officially, I should say, getting into some new markets as Brazil to get 2600.
Atari has signed a deal with Indústrias Gradiente Brasileira to produce a Brazilian 2600. So yes, that's right. You previewed it. There have been 2600 clones in Brazil, and just to give a brief rundown, Brazil is an interesting market because it is the largest economy in South America. but they have had for a very long time now pretty restrictive rules considering the importation of manufactured products. Actually, I talked to a guy who used to work for the, I believe, the development department or economics department of the Brazilian government back in the 60s. And he was telling me that they said, they did an analysis. They figured out if we try to manufacture and have to compete with outside manufacturers like the United States and the up-and-coming Asian countries, we'll never succeed. And instead, they decided that if they became a manufacturing base for countries that were so poor that they couldn't even afford the stuff coming out of Asia, like the African countries, maybe India, then they would have a market. And so they actively were sending out trade missions to Africa, to the subcontinent, and so forth, in order to become the manufacturer for those places. And those restrictions that come out of the late 60s and the 70s are still in place at this point, are still in place to this day, actually.
And it should be noted that at the time Brazil was controlled by a military dictatorship, which meant that they had a wide degree of latitude to impose their will on the manufacturing and import sectors.
Definitely. And so there were clone 2600s being made in Brazil, but this is going to be the first time that it's actually there. Gradiente is an interesting company because they're going to end up doing the NES and all sorts of consoles going forward. Obviously, Brazil then becomes famous for Tectoy and the Sega consoles, but Gradiente basically is making every other console that you can legitimately buy in Brazil, other than the Sega ones coming from Tectoy.
Right, and Tectoy was the brash upstart.
Yeah.
Gradiente was the established kind of big company, and Tectoy was the brash upstart, just somewhat mirroring at least the marketing impression that Sega gave about Sega Nintendo in other parts of the world as well.
Yeah, and Gradiente, I mean, this model is very common in South America. Argentina had companies like Doriot, which would then they bought the license from Commodore for the C64. They also bought the license for Whirlpool, washing machines, and all sorts of stuff like this. So you'd get these very disparate Western or North American, for example, products suddenly appearing under one common brand name in Argentina. And Gradiente plays that role here as well. They're not just in video games, they're in basically all electronics and appliances, but with far less imported parts than you would get, for example, in Argentina.
Yeah. No, I'm telling you, of all the areas of the world that have undeveloped video game histories, the Latin American countries, I think, are the most fascinating.
Oh, yeah.
Because they lived in such an interesting gray market area, because there was a lot of shady stuff going on, but also a lot of sort of legitimate stuff, and it kind of all blurred into this gray sludge. And I just think that's fascinating, and I would love to see more written about that. I don't have the sources or the language to be the one to do that, but I would love to see somebody do that. And I know our mutual friend Guillermo, whose name I cannot pronounce in the Argentinian way. Guillermo, that's what it is. Guillermo. I know our friend Guillermo is making some strides in that area, particularly in Argentina. But this is just a plug that I would love to see more out of Latin America.
As somebody who was deep in it and actively selling software at that time in Argentina, I mean, there's no market like it, due to the level of organization, due to the level of commercialization, and the sheer quantity of platforms that we had. I mean, you had your Speckies, your Amstrads, your MSXs, your C64s, your Amigas, Atari STs. Then we had, the Atari XE system. We had your Famicom ripoffs. You name it, we had it. We had our own homegrown or a sub-licensed version of the 2600 still running. I mean, it was just insane. Plus, arcades. I mean, we basically got everything in the arcades, as it was showing up in the States. Legit or not legit, you take your pick.
Right.
But yeah, fun stuff. Okay.
Meanwhile, though, back in America, the third-party controller market booms.
A massive number of new providers of third-party game controllers has been popping up. Amiga, Zircon, Wyco, Suncom, Diskwasher. I actually had to look that up to make sure they just didn't throw it in as like an April Fool's joke. And Questar Controls are just some of those ready to show off their wares at CES.
Yeah, it's just, obviously the 2600 market's about to fall apart, but the 2600 is like in 10 to 15 million homes. So you see an explosion of accessories. I mean, controllers is one part of that we're talking about today, but it's really all accessories, from controllers to storage cases to, and I'm not making this one up either, gaming gloves.
Oh, yeah. We've seen ads for those. Well, and also don't forget, the same 9-pin controller is on the VIC-20. You got 2 of them on the C64. I mean, it's showing up on so many devices. It's going to show up on the Genesis, for God's sake.
Yeah, it became the standard. Yeah. Absolutely.
So there is these devices that they're selling are not just for the 2600. They're for all the compatible devices, and they're going to keep going. I mean, for years and years and years. So it'll be interesting to see what's happening. And we should also note here, the CES is happening in June. So a lot of the newspapers and magazines don't have any actual reporting from CES. We will have a couple of stories that are coming out of CES from the weekly publications, especially the English ones. But we're going to have a lot more on CES next episode, when those reports start hitting the bigger publications.
Absolutely. And speaking of being present on multiple platforms, North American Philips goes multi-platform.
Following last month's news that the Odyssey 3 was being reworked as a home computer, North American Philips has announced that they will be developing for multiple platforms, including the 2600 and ColecoVision. Defunct U.S. Games' Pink Panther license seems to have landed with them, as is a game tie-in to the action figure series Power Lords and 3 additional ColecoVision titles. Only one game appears to have made it out the door, War Room, for the ColecoVision.
Yeah, late to the party. North American Philips is finally realizing that they've been doing this whole video game thing all wrong for years.
Yeah, I mean,
too bad, so sad.
They got in too early on the console as a home computer deal. I mean, the Odyssey 2 was just too forward thinking for its time and its capabilities. Some of the games were kind of good. I mean, Casey's Crazy Chase is a fun game. But yeah, for the most part, it's too little too late. The Power Lords license. Did you ever see Power Lords figures?
That's different from Captain Power?
Oh, yeah, very different.
Yeah, I don't know Power Lords, no.
These things were just fucking nightmarish. The figure is, one half of the figure is this guy in an orange jumpsuit. And then you
wait a minute.
Hit a button and it just turns around, and on the back of his head is another character.
I actually have one of these. I have the orange and blue guy.
Yeah.
Because I have one, at least one of not quite every action figure line, but a lot of them. But that just goes to show I didn't even know that was a Power Lord. I just knew this was this random action figure that I had. Yeah, so I do know this line.
Yeah. There was supposed to be a game, and there's apparently lore. I just remember a buddy of mine had one of those figures, and it just freaked the crap out of me. I was like, "What's this supposed to be? Why does he have 2 heads?" No, he transforms. It's like, but you can see the head.
I have the orange guy where when you squeeze his legs, it spins it around.
That's what it was. It was squeeze the legs and not push a button. Yeah.
Yeah. I've got that.
Yeah. But I mean, they're only going to get one
wow.
ColecoVision game out, as far as I can tell. There's no 2600 titles, and yeah, it's a cluster. So sad. And there's no Pink Panther game. We're going to have to wait until Magic Bytes does one, and that's not necessarily a great game. So sad.
But we've got something better for you than Pink Panther, Carl, because Atari gets Mario.
Nintendo has announced that Atari has acquired the console and home computer rights to their Mario Brothers arcade game. Atari plans to release the console port by Christmas, with home computer ports to follow early next year.
This was right around the time when they were in their negotiations over the family computer, and so that may have played a role. I'm just speculating. I don't have inside info saying that played a role, but that may have played a role. But it is interesting. The video game historian Norm, of course, recently did an episode talking about Nintendo games on Atari systems that's well worth a watch. But yeah, just kind of this weird in-between period where you actually got some of the older Nintendo games also appearing on Atari systems.
Yeah, and it is kind of a weird, I mean, the ports, yeah. I mean, the ports for home computers are of mixed quality. Now, Atari themselves releases some of them, but for example, they don't release, as far as I know, a Commodore 64 version. There's just a UK port made later on, which by Ocean. So it's kind of weird what's happening with that one as well. But yeah, the fact that Atari is going to hold on to the home versions of Mario Brothers for so long is kind of weird. And it also begs the question, I mean, if they're licensing this, what are Nintendo's plans for a US launch of the Famicom? That kind of puts it a little bit into question. Are they just thinking, this thing's going to be popular for 6 months and then we have to move on anyway? I don't know.
Yeah, it's a good question, because in Japan, Mario Brothers was actually a very key part of the marketing of the family computer. This is something that Florent Gorge, the French historian, revealed in his history of the family computer, because they deliberately created Mario Brothers on not top-of-the-line arcade hardware, because they developed it on hardware that could easily translate into a near arcade perfect port on the family computer. And so they released Mario Brothers in the arcade, released Mario Brothers on the Famicom only a couple of months later, and then touted how close to arcade quality it was. But it was only close to arcade quality because they had deliberately used less powerful arcade hardware. They were deliberately building synergy between the concept of arcade perfect and their new home system as they're trying to pivot away from the arcade.
And it's funny because first time I saw Mario Brothers was many, many years later. There was this weird little passageway going to a supermarket inside Northgate Mall in Seattle. And in this passageway, they'd always have 2 or 3 old arcade cabinets. And this must have been probably 1989, 88, 89, somewhere in that area. And I saw it for the first time, and I thought it was a Play Choice 10. That was my immediate thought. It was like, oh, it's a Play Choice 10. I was like, wait a second. No, it's and that's the first time I actually saw Mario Brothers. As opposed to Super Mario Brothers or any other variant with Mario in it.
Interesting. Yeah, I never played Mario Brothers in the arcade, never have, but I did play Mario Brothers on the 7800.
Ooh. How did that play?
Well, fine. I mean, it was fine. I mean, it played very well in the 7800. I don't have the arcade version to compare it to, in my own experience, but it played fine.
Cool. Yeah, I mean, hey, and it always allowed Atari to add the Mario Brothers to their advertising, which they love to do. So, Okay, and it gave us the first live-action Mario for a Western audience in the TV commercials. But we'll get to that when we get to that.
Can't wait. Meanwhile, Starpath prepares to sweat.
Starpath Corporation has announced hopes to show off 5 or 6 new games at CES, including Rabbit Transit, a souped-up Frogger clone from the description, while Sweat will be a multi-load decathlon game for up to 9 players.
Now, some people think that Sweat becomes summer games after they're bought by Epic. That's not quite right, because they did not take any work that they had done on Sweat and port that to what became summer games. Like, they started over from a game design perspective. But it's because that they started on this game that they decided to do summer games. So this is, in that sense, it is the beginning of what becomes one of Epic's biggest hit series.
Oh, definitely. I mean, the whole idea of the multi-load individual events with dedicated graphics in each one. I mean, it's clearly coming from that place. It's really just a question of, implementation. But I mean, there's no way you could have used the 2600 code on a Commodore 64, which becomes the lead platform.
Right.
The sprites are different. Everything is different. You'd have to bend yourself backwards to make it work, and that doesn't make any sense. But it is going to be very important. Now, granted, summer games will get ported to the 2600, so, there is that. And it gets slightly different events, but it is that. But I don't think it's reusing any of the Starpath code then.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And meanwhile, Activision announces Decathlon.
Oh, yes. Activision has announced their entry into Olympic fever with Decathlon for the 2600. David Crane is promising to bring all 10 Decathlon events to the system with very fluid graphics.
Absolutely. This is, of course, all of this is happening because the Olympics are coming to Los Angeles in 1984, the Summer Olympics. Yeah. And this is a big, big deal in America land. Like, wow, did you know there's this thing called the Olympics?
We missed out on it last time when it was in Russia. So now we have to
exactly. And, which features such things as McDonald's having a giveaway where if Americans win events, people win prizes, but making sure that the vast majority of those events are in things dominated by the Soviet bloc.
Of course, when the Soviet bloc decides not to show up.
Yes, for those of you who have seen the Simpsons episode that takes place in 1984 and it's a Krusty Burger thing where they're doing the same thing. It's funny, it's a joke, but the real funny part of the joke is they're not even exaggerating. That is just basically exactly what happened. Substitute McDonald's for Krusty Burger, and that is pretty much exactly what happened. Decathlon is a David Crane game. It's one of the less mentioned, kind of less celebrated games by him. Not that it's a bad game. It's just that it gets lost in the shuffle of his true mega hits.
Yeah.
So I did an email interview with David Crane where I tried to ask him about things that other people were not asking him about all the time. So I didn't ask him about Pitfall for the 50 millionth time. And so I asked him about Decathlon because no one really talks about Decathlon. So I thought I would read his answer, because why not? The inspiration for Decathlon could be as simple as noting that the Summer Olympics were coming to America in 1984. Yeah, like we said. But I also wanted to make a game in which the player worked up a sweat. The inspiration for the decathlete dated back to my work on a little running man that spawned Pitfall. I found while trying to animate a person on a game screen that 16 bits could make a character that was more than twice as nice as 8 bits. Unfortunately, to make a 16-bit object on the 2600 used up both player graphic objects and couldn't be done in a game like Pitfall where there were enemies and pickups on the same path. I realized that solo track and field events are a player against the clock, with some interaction with terrain, but they shouldn't need another 8-bit object on the path. The decathlete is made up both player objects such as that the head, or the decathlete is made up of both player objects such that the head, torso, and leg nearest the camera use one 8-bit object, while the arm and leg farthest from the camera use the other. If you look closely, the back arm and leg are actually a different darker color from the front arm and leg. This improves the realism of the character appearing to place the back extremities in shadow. With both player graphic objects used for the decathlete, I had to pull some tricks to make elements like the finish line, hurdles, javelin, and pole vault goal. The rest is just 3,000 hours or so of programming. So there's a little about decathlon straight from the inventor's mind to my email, since it is one of his less discussed games.
And that is interesting. I'm looking at screenshots right now on Moby Games, and yeah, it's a very much a different color. One leg is always a different color than the other. And yeah, it makes sense. If you don't have the objects available to you, or you need all the objects for that very complex sprite by 2600 standards, you need to have a game that you're not going to have to create other characters to interact with. I mean, typical David Crane, super smart, super thinking within the limitations of the system. Very, very cool.
Absolutely. Meanwhile, no transition, it sometimes happens. Disney license to Atari.
While Disney has been talking up its efforts to get into software publishing for computers, Atari will be debuting Disney licensed titles for the 2600 and 5200 at CES. Dumbo and Mickey Mouse will be coming to the 2600, while Sport Goofy, an IP developed to promote Disney's line of athletic wear and sporting events, will be coming to the 5200.
Atari's just going after all of them. We have all the coin-op licenses. What next? Let's get all the children's entertainment licenses.
Of course. Now, some prototypes will come out of these, but yes, none of these are actually going to get released. Because Crash?
Yeah, I think the time machine may be littered with examples why this doesn't come to pass.
Yeah, sad but true. Yeah.
Speaking of things that never come to pass, AT&T may be mulling over online gaming.
The Arcade Express newsletter reports that according to an AT&T insider, the telecom giant may soon be test marketing a modem system for existing consoles, allowing for online multiplayer. The modems would retail for under $50.
Go home, AT&T, you're drunk.
Well, I mean, considering that this is also the time, when Fun Meister's about to launch this system, we've got so many attempts at this online distribution of software, online data systems, and everything else. It's not the craziest thing in the world for AT&T to think about, since, I mean, they're sitting in the middle of it. They're the ideal person to become the distributor because, well, they don't have to pay AT&T for use of the lines.
Yeah. Just too bad the entire market is falling apart around everybody's heads.
Yeah, minor technicality.
And it ain't just that home console market falling apart, because as we shift our focus here at the Time Machine to home computers, we see that TI's losses are massive.
Texas Instruments has announced an after-tax loss for the second quarter ending in May of $100 million. While that figure is already shocking, the loss is almost entirely due to their flailing home computer division, which lost anywhere from $200 to $250 million in that quarter. And this is just one quarter, people. And Analysts interviewed by the New York Times see the destructive price war in the home computer market as unsustainable and self-defeating. The best comment in the article comes from Harry Fox, president of Spectra Video, who explains that TI, quote, got suckered by Jack, end quote, a reference to Commodore's Jack Tramiel, by getting into a price war that would turn their business unprofitable, while Jack had introduced the VIC-20, which would keep a margin. Some retailers may already be predicting that TI will exit the market, leading them to hold back on ordering more product. This is all coming after the grandeur of 1982, when many would consider the home computer market to have been born, and Bill Cosby, TI's home computer spokesperson, joked at their CES party in Vegas that it was easy to sell computers if you paid people $100 to buy them, referencing TI's rebate program. TI is estimated to be preparing to manufacture 3 million computers for 1983 on an estimate that the home computer market will sell 6.7 million machines in total, while most analysts expect the number to be 5 million, and this on the backdrop of IBM's Peanut being anticipated at $600 and Japanese manufacturers having just announced that they have established a computer standard that multiple manufacturers will follow, and Commodore dropping the wholesale price of the C64 to just $200.
Oh, TI-EIO.
Yeah.
Their computer division was led by a relatively young executive at the time, William Turner, and I don't think there's any other interpretation except that he was entirely suckered by Jack.
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, I don't remember if it's this. I think it's this CES, the summer CES. There's I don't know how real the story is. It may just be apocryphal, where this is going to be the one where TI finally decides to call it quits, or is it the next year? Does TI call it quits in 83 or in 84?
I think it's in 83.
In 83, yeah. I think it's at this CES where they basically give up because they're going to try to rebate, or where Jack finally figures out that the place where TI is going to try to make their money is their peripherals, and he's going to announce a massive price cut in things like the printers for the C64 and the modem. And that's when basically TI realizes the jig is up. But considering the losses that they're having, I don't think that that's really what's going to kill them. It's just the simple fact that there's no way they're going to be able to compete against a C64 that keeps dropping in price. There's just no there. Yeah.
Nope. Jack got his revenge.
Oh, yeah.
TI nearly destroyed Commodore by undercutting him in the calculator market in the early 70s. He did not forget.
Because it's always personal with Jack.
And speaking of some of that C64 price stuff you were talking about, Commodore pushes price in C64 ads.
Leaving Shatner behind, the C64's ad campaign is going for price consciousness by claiming that, quote, you can't buy a better computer for twice the price, end quote, while comparing the $600 C64 to the almost $1,400 Apple IIe with 64K of RAM and the IBM PC with 64K, or the $999 Trash 83 with just 16K.
And I think leaving Shatner behind was probably also a price-conscious move, because they actually got Shatner at the exact perfect moment. They actually filmed the first Vic ads with him on the set of Wrath of Khan. And, you know, the double whammy of Wrath of Khan and TJ Hooker made Shatner an incredibly marketable commodity again, something that he had not really been since the original Star Trek series had ended. And so they got him on the cheap, and I'm sure that once he was established again, they didn't want to keep paying the new Shatner rates.
Definitely not. I mean, and we got previews in a couple of magazines this month of Wrath of Khan. So it's coming. He's coming back, and he's coming back hard and strong. And
the Shad is back.
I mean, I was a TJ Hooker kid. I loved that show every week. Couldn't really tell you what it was about, but it had Captain Kirk as a cop, so I was happy. Heather Locklear was also easy on the eyes, so it was all good. And for some reason, the kid from Grease 2 was in there. Don't know why. But Grease 2 was on a heavy rotation on Showtime, so I knew Grease 2. I didn't know there was a Grease 1, but I knew there was a Grease 2. It was a weird time to perceive media because whatever you got your hands on, that was the media landscape.
And as we've established twice now, the Kuros household was definitely not an HBO household. It was a Showtime household.
Oh, yes. I still remember we had one weekend where we got HBO for free. Carl had to watch Fraggle Rock. It was only on the TV in the living room. We had a dinner party with a bunch of people over. We had to turn on the TV anyway to watch Fraggle Rock. Okay.
I love it.
Crazy stuff.
But back to those home computer prices, because Atari offers 800 rebates.
Feeling pressure from TI and Commodore, Atari has announced a $100 rebate for the Atari 800, which should bring the price of the machine down below $400.
How low can you go? That's the name of the home computer market now.
Well, considering that Commodore just dropped the wholesale price of the C64 to $200, you're still more expensive with an 800, which is from 1979.
Well, it's because of all that shielding they had to put in to meet the FCC standards.
But at this point, you could have just taken the shielding out. And you're going to tell me a piece of freaking metal is costing you that much? Bull crap.
Metal is actually one of the most expensive things in those old computers. It's certainly not silicon, the most common one of the most common materials on Earth.
I know, but Jesus, I mean, they also got all those extra cartridge slots and stuff inside there that are making that machine extremely expensive. But, but okay, and here, just as a side note, the price war is not limited to the U.S. In the UK, where everything is costing more money, it's a little bit behind the curve, but there the price drop is even steeper. They've dropped it £100. Again, the price of the pound is about $2.30, I think, to the dollar at this point. So, bringing the price of the 800 there to £299, which, I mean, when you think about it, that's massive, massive price. It's like $700. No, more than, $700. But the rest of the home micros have also taken deep price dives. Retailer Dixon's is selling the TI-99 4A for £150, with accessories supposedly worth £56. The Dragon 32 for $175. The VIC-20 starter kit at a $140. The C64 for $350. The ZX81 for just £40, even though rival retailer Greens has dropped it to £30. This is from an article in Personal Computer News, a weekly computer business magazine. One analyst called the price drops, quote, suicidal, end quote. Yeah.
There was a small crash in the British market at this time. People don't really remember it or report on it because I think most of the British enthusiasts that got involved were just getting in about the time. They're more mid to late 80s kids, that were hitting right after. But there was a small shakeout, some price war stuff going on. Also, this is 83 is when piracy really gets going in a big way, when Amstrad releases its two tape decks where you can do really affordable and allow really easy copying of tapes. There's kind of a little piracy spike and some price warring, and obviously they don't have a real crash. Their market doesn't go away, but there's a shakeout right in here that a lot of people don't remember in the British market.
And we're going to have another story about the cassette business, especially in the UK market. That is still coming. But yeah, you're right. The predominance of cassettes, which is going to be a hallmark of the 8-bit era in England, and that absolutely massive piracy scene that is going to be exploding or is already started to explode, because the magazines have been talking about it forever at this point. First you had piracy on the level of the UK game developers and publishers are basically just blatantly copying what everybody else is doing. We talked about how Ocean Software, still known as Spectrum Games at this point, all their games are just copycats. So you've got a Donkey Kong clone, they got a Frogger clone, etc., etc. And so, yeah. And then when people are just starting copying their software, that's just going to make the software business extremely difficult to, it's going to make it difficult to make money in. And this is where we're going to get companies like Codemasters. But that's still coming a couple of years down the line. Fun stuff.
Absolutely. Well, meanwhile, while they're having a cassette problem in the United Kingdom, the Atari 1200 has a problem with slots.
Oh, yeah. I was almost hoping you were going to give me that whole Beavis thing. Slots. I got the slots. Okay. Some third-party software cartridges from the likes of CBS Software and Thorn EMI will not fit in the redesigned cartridge slot of the Atari 1200, the latest iteration of Atari's 8-bit computer line.
The 1200, the system that was supposed to unify the 400 and 800 into a glorious new future of Atari computing, and didn't.
No, it did not.
And this is one of the reasons why, right here.
Yeah, I don't know, why would you change the size of the slot? It's doesn't make any sense.
Why would you release a controller, an analog controller that doesn't self-center?
It's just dumb. Okay.
They probably saved a nickel somewhere on the redesigned case by redesigning the cartridge slot and didn't think about full backwards compatibility. When you have a standard, you need to keep to it when you upgrade the system.
Yeah.
And speaking of standards, the MSX standard announced.
14 Japanese companies, including Matsushita, Sony, and Yamaha, and 2 American ones, Spectra Video and Microsoft, have teamed up to create a home computer standard, MSX. This standardization should help alleviate many of the problems current users have with incompatible software and give the Japanese an edge in penetrating the US market. The Z80-based system will sport a TI graphics chip, and while all systems will be compatible, each manufacturer will still have the option of customizing their offerings. Activision, Sierra, and Spinnaker have already agreed to support the standard.
Of course, it was Kaznishi at ASCII, which also was functioning as Microsoft Japan at the time, who had the idea of doing this, and he chose the Spectra Video computer as the baseline standard, which is why they're involved in this. And it was really just trying to replicate the victory that the VHS standard had over Betamax in the video cassette market. This idea that if you get a bunch of powerful companies to agree on a unified hardware standard and then get software companies to put their stuff on that hardware standard, it's going to overwhelm other systems, even if those other systems may be superior, because you'll have a scale that allows for basically better prices is what it comes down to. And it was tried a couple of times in video games and computers, and it just doesn't work. And it's that second to last line there is a big part of that. Each manufacturer will still have the option of customizing their offerings. There's always a way that somebody in computers or video games can add a little something cooler that the others can't do, And that's going to provide an advantage. It's not like a VHS where, okay, I guess one company could make the clock on the VHS slightly easier to set, but they're all still going to be playing video cassette tapes, so it doesn't matter that much which one you get.
That's true. And the problem is also the TI graphics chip that they're using is already old.
Yeah, exactly. It's already too old.
The Z80 that they're using is already old.
16 bits here, baby.
Yeah.
8 bits too late.
If you want to play a scrolling shooter on an MSX, be ready for that nice little, I think it's an 8-pixel jump for each thing because of the way it's handling sprites and background tiles. It's just too old.
Why was the stealth genre essentially invented on the MSX? I know it wasn't the first game, Department of Corrections. I'm just saying, why was it essentially invented as we know it on the MSX? Because Kojima was told to make an action game on the MSX, and there was no way to make a shooter with the number of sprites he had, so he made a game where you were trying to avoid shooting anything instead. I mean, yeah, the limitations of the system...
But that was the MSX2. That's already the improved version.
That's a good call out. Yeah.
And I make that distinction because the original MSX is what my best friend had. I have spent a lot of time on an OG MSX. I have played a lot of games on an OG MSX. I know what the limitations of that hardware are. And unfortunately, for most action games, it was not very good.
No.
And, it's coming from a C64, with the hardware sprites the way they were, with the hardware background scrolling the way it was. It really was a downgrade. The one positive is the resolution was kind of nice, but that's about it.
And I mean, the thing is, and just going back to like why standards doesn't work here, it's hard to standardize on cutting edge technology, right? You standardize on mature technology that everybody understands. And that's fine for something like video cassettes where the method's not going to change very much. But in computers where there's newer stuff coming along all the time, you can never standardize on the cutting edge. You're always going to be a little bit behind, and then no one's going to want your standard because it's obsolete. People keep trying to do standards. And I mean, obviously there are standards in the sense PC compatibles are a standard now. And certainly in computer peripherals, like, NVIDIA puts out a graphic card standard and then like 5 or 6 different companies actually manufacture your GeForce cards. There are places where you can standardize, but on a whole system like this, it just doesn't work in computers and video games.
Yeah. It's a valiant effort, and it's going to give the Japanese manufacturers a little bit of help because there's so many different Japanese machines popping up around this time that are incompatible with one another. And I don't know enough about the Japanese market to know how big that incompatibility effect was and how this may have or helped or prevent the kind of crash that we're going to see in the home computer market in North America. But
right. And then, it was never able to come to America because the American systems were just too cheap and better, like the C64. And, Jack Tramiel always gave himself a lot of credit for keeping the Japanese out, and the analysts of the time also did. I don't have access to, what the Japanese were thinking, what people at the Japanese companies were thinking. But from the American perspective, Jack Tramiel absolutely did keep MSX out of America, for the most part. Barely came over here because he got the C64 price so low that it wasn't worth their time to try to take on the C64 with their clearly inferior technology at a not competitive price point once the C64 was selling at its lower prices.
Exactly. And I mean, it's going to get some penetration in Europe, Spain primarily, but beyond
and the Netherlands
too,
because Philips becomes part of the consortium.
That's true. But beyond those two territories, it's really a non-issue.
Yeah, absolutely. But speaking of standards, Unitronic Sonic is everything.
No. You're bearing the lead here.
Man.
Oh, come on.
What I do sometimes is when you highlight the next one, I think that's the one we just did, and my eyes skip over the.
Sorry.
No, it's not your fault. I'm just explaining what happens. And besides, why would you need an MSX standard computer, Carl, when Coleco's got you covered with the Atom debuts at CES?
Coleco has decided to take on the home computer juggernauts in earnest with the introduction of the Atom. For just $600, buyers will get a full-blown computer, a built-in daisy wheel printer, CP/M compatibility, high-speed magnetic tape storage, full travel keyboard, 80K of RAM, and compatibility with all Coleco games. There will also be an optional 500K mass memory drive for storage.
So, tell me a little more about that high-speed magnetic tape storage there, Coleco. That gonna be a nice, dependable kind of storage there. We gonna like that storage?
Yes. Oh, the storage wafers. There's a bunch of articles this month about the storage wafers. And this is a similar technology to what Clive Sinclair has been calling his microdrive. Which also in June, at the beginning of June, right before CES, we have the Earl's Court computer show in England. And the microdrive, again, is a no-show. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. We know where this is going. And, yeah, so this is this thing. We talked about it last month already. The first computer to have this was, I can't remember the name of it anymore. Not important. But it was going to be this replacement for cassettes, cheaper than floppy disks. And it's basically just a flimsier version of a cassette, and it's gonna suck.
Yeah, I mean, the market was in a weird place where everyone had rejected cassettes in the U.S. As a medium at this point, but you couldn't really do a low-cost floppy disk yet, and Coleco so badly wanted to be the all-in-one at the cheap price for everybody. And with cassette, that just wasn't going to work, but at floppy, they couldn't hit their price point. And so they made a deal with the devil, and it was a bad deal. Now, they had other problems, too. They had some problems with the printer.
Wait. Let's talk about the problems with that printer, because it's not really a problem with the printer, is it? Where is the power supply for the whole computer? It's in the printer. So if you don't have this massive blocky printer plugged in, you don't have the computer plugged in.
Yeah. Bit of an issue. I mean, they got carried away with the idea because the idea of it was great. $600 for all of that was incredible, but it wasn't actually doable.
No. And the 80K of RAM also proves to be something that you only get with an expansion. And it becomes extremely problematic because the Z80 in this thing can... I think it's a Z80, right?
Yeah, it should be.
Yeah. Can only address 64K of RAM, so there's all these weird
8-bit processor.
Exactly. There's all sorts of problems with this thing. It's a cluster. Now, the Atari also has an announcement. May or may not have been a reaction to the Atom being shown.
I think it was. I think it was.
Oh, yeah. So they're also announcing at CES that the 600 XL that we talked about earlier, one of these new replacement machines, will launch with a $465 package, which will include a daisy wheel printer as well. So, they're trying to come in at the same price as the Atom. Now, the Atom, just like the MSX, is using basically the same TI graphics chip, which is not really up to speed anymore. It's great for a ColecoVision, but not necessarily for a computer. And yeah, it's a cluster.
Yeah, this is going to be a problem. But who needs an Atom when Unitronics' Sonic is everything to everyone?
Unitronics has announced their Sonic computer, a 6502-based system using TI's graphic chip. Oh, this thing again. Already in use in the ColecoVision. The system will have 48K of RAM, expandable to 80K, run some Apple II software, have add-on expansions for Z80 functionality and CPM, Atari 2600 cards, and have a built-in stringy floppy wafer drive. This is the same crap we were just talking about. And the base unit is expected to retail for under $200.
I hear it cooks a pretty mean breakfast too.
Yeah. Now this is coverage from before CES. At CES, the price will rise by $200, so to $400.
Yeah.
And yeah, we're never going to see this machine.
No. So yeah, I mean, it's just, I mean, there's a theme here, though, right? I mean, the all these companies get the sense that the computer is about to penetrate the mainstream of the home, and they feel like to really capture the true mass market user, they need to offer them the complete package. And so with this in sight, everyone is trying to offer a complete package, even though it's completely unrealistic to do so. It's,
yeah,
it's a market transition, and they're on the wrong track.
Well, I mean, nobody knows yet what you need a computer for.
Absolutely.
There's no functional purpose to it. I mean, we talked about this in a 30-year jump a month or two ago with the advent of Photoshop being ported to Windows. Where it's like, well, what the frag does a normal person need Photoshop on Windows for? Oh, when you get the internet and you want to share pictures with people. Suddenly, now everybody needs Photoshop. Up until then, it was purely for professionals. There was no point in having it. But the moment you can send pictures by email or post them to a website, suddenly now everybody wants to be able to add, a fun little, hey, look at me, sign onto their home photos. So, yeah, I mean, you need some kind of function. That is still missing, and, yeah. It's still missing. Other than games. Games are the one function of the home computer, so...
Exactly. But meanwhile, in the peripheral scene, move over mice. The koala is here.
The Koala Pad, that is. Definitely not the first touchpad of its kind. The Koala Pad by Koala Technologies Corporation will become an iconic part of the 8-bit art scene, providing affordable, at this point $125, alternative to paddles and joysticks for would-be artists.
Yeah, I mean, this is one of those, epoch, game-changing, kind of devices. And, the first practical, like you said, not the first one, but the first kind of practical drawing pad, which is still a thing people use to this day. Yeah. So, and good job.
And the
good job, Koala Technologies.
Is just ubiquitous. Anybody who did graphics back on the 8-bit computer had a Koala Pad.
Absolutely.
I didn't. I instead invested wisely in a light pen. Whoa, that was a mistake. But, yeah, Koala Pads were very, very cool for a very, very long period of time.
Absolutely. Meanwhile, Rawmox bets on rewritability.
Rawmox Inc., which has produced games for the Atari 8-bit computer line so far, has introduced new Edge Connector Programmable Cartridges, or ECPCs, which will allow the games on the carts to be rewritten either by the manufacturer, for example when a game is returned to them, or by consumers at in-store stations. The carts will hold 16K of information each, and Romox plans to make games for the C64, TI-99, as well as the Atari 8-bits.
Yeah. Store stations. Stores are going to love to have these extra kiosks that they have in their, that they have to maintain in their stores, where they get the privilege of selling software at a lower margin than they would otherwise sell it, because it's just rewritable on a cartridge. They're going to love that. Just the way that all the retailers in Japan loved having Famicom Disk System kiosks in their stores.
You know, the analogy, the comparison with the disk system is so obvious here. And the economic problems with it are also so obvious. Now, if you could have put this, I don't know, in a 7-Eleven or something, maybe this could have been something that could take off. I don't know, Redbox before Redbox.
Right.
But yeah, you're right. Where's the economic incentive other than, you know, the store doesn't have the cost of inventory. Doesn't have
but their margins are so much lower on this nonsense. And that's what killed the Famicom Disk System in Japan in a big way, is that retailers got such pathetic margins on those disc games that they didn't want to have anything to do with those dumb kiosks.
Makes sense. Makes perfect sense.
It doesn't make up for the benefit of not carrying as much inventory.
True. Especially since most people still think they can return the inventory. Ha ha ha. Now, a fun little side note, Xbox co-founder Ed Freeze will get his start making games for Romox.
Yeah, yes he will, though I know the Department of Corrections would point out that Ed Freeze was the head of the Microsoft Game Studio at the time and was an instrumental champion in getting the Xbox project approved at Microsoft. And obviously, as the head of the game studio, also provided support in the terms of software for the Xbox. But he was not actually what one would consider a co-founder of the Xbox project.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for correcting me and getting that right off the bat. Thank you.
But let's forget about rewritability here. In fact, let's forget about carts altogether. Bye-bye, carts. Hello, cassettes.
The dominance of cheap cassette-based software in the UK seems to be heralding the end of cartridge-based software releases. Both Dragon Data and Vicsoft, the software arms of Dragon makers and of the Dragon 32 and Commodore's VIC-20 software initiative, respectively, have stated that they see no future in cartridge software and will be focusing more and more on cassette releases. A Vicsoft spokesman said, quote, "If we're talking about a VIC-20, who is going to invest a third of what he pays for his machine on a software package? We don't believe there will be a swing towards cartridges," end quote. TI, of course, has been going on in the opposite direction, claiming carts offer better value for money, and Acorn and Sinclair have both been talking up carts for their systems.
Yeah, I mean, cassette's going to win because cartridges are expensive.
Cartridges are expensive.
That's simple.
Yeah, cartridges are expensive, and even if you release it on cartridge, you're still going to find the pirated version on a cassette someplace.
Exactly.
Yeah. So, but I mean, the fact that Acorn and Sinclair were talking about this, it's crazy.
Yeah. Yeah, Sinclair and cartridges, that is kind of hilarious. Oh, Uncle Clive. Crazy Uncle Clive. And meanwhile, as the British market is trying to break free from cartridges, IBM tries to break free from MS-DOS.
Oh, nice transition. The battle over OS supremacy on the IBM PC has begun in earnest, with IBM announcing plans to diversify the operating system offerings on its personal computer. IBM states that they see a need for a multitasking operating system with more flexible data structures, especially for the business market. By some accounts, IBM is developing its own OS compatible with CPI-X, the Unix variant running on the IBM Series 1 systems. IBM has also arranged for CDI, a Bellevue, Washington company, to port the PIC operating system to the PC late in 1983. Microsoft seems unfazed as they say they have a, quote, long-term relationship with IBM and have solid plans involving PC DOS, end quote.
IBM will keep on trying. But turns out it's hard to make an operating system.
You mean OS2 is not around the corner?
Ooh.
Now, interestingly enough, IBM and Microsoft's competitors, Digital Equipment Corporation, Digital Research, and VisiCorp, have joined forces to offer DEC's low-end microcomputers, such as the Rainbow 100, with concurrent CPM86 and Vision operating environments.
Oh, those are all things people really want. They especially like a GUI and non-GUI operating environment made by two completely different companies trying to operate on top of each other. That is great for the memory optimization of your computer.
Oh, definitely. And the Rainbow 100 was such a powerful machine to begin with.
They're just throwing all their hits out there.
Well, it's basically, what else are you going to do when you're Kmart and Sears?
At least we won't die alone.
Exactly. Now, and this is the one that got me the most, and the link is in the show notes. Microsoft has taken out a one-page ad in UK Weekly Personal Computer News announcing, quote, the ball is over. I must have misquoted this. 1 second.
Yeah, you're fine.
It's not the balls is over because, that would be ballsy even for them.
Yeah, they do speak English over there.
Yeah. Okay, the battle is over. And that MS-DOS is the number one 16-bit OS beating CPM. And, they have a bunch of quotes in here as well, of which one is the clear winner, and it's clearly MS-DOS has killed CPM86.
So what do you do when you're an operating system company that has killed all of your competitors? Well, you expand multi-tool with Word to start conquering other computing areas.
There you go. Microsoft's expansion into productivity software has hit a milestone with the introduction of multi-tool Word, a word processing program that expands the existing multi-tool suite of programs and works with their recently introduced Microsoft Mouse for the IBM PC.
Yeah, it's not going to be a very good program. WordPerfect's going to laugh at them. But you know what they say, first they laugh at you, then they get mad at you, then you win. To heavily paraphrase Gandhi.
Exactly. Now,
first they laugh at you, then they fight you, then you win. Whatever it is. But the point is,
along that lines, but
the point is, yeah.
Well, and I mean, there's a lot of movement right here because this question of, okay, you got the computer, you're not programming your own stuff. We've talked about this transition over the last couple of years here on the show, how we've gone from the hobbyist, where the main purpose of buying the computer was to program your own apps, to now you're buying the computer because of the apps that are available, and the fight over, main things like word processors. That's the one thing everybody can agree on. That's why you need that daisy wheel printer. You're not doing it for graphics, you're doing it for text. So MicroPro International, makers of WordStar, arguably the top dog in word processors at this point in time, is not sitting on its laurels, announcing that their new version of WordStar 3.30 will be combinable with PlanStar, their financial modeling tool, and Starburst, which is a tool to link MicroPro to other programs. Micropro is making the effort to appeal to as many users as possible, as their software will not only run under PC-DOS, MS-DOS, but also under CP/M 2.0, Apple systems running a CP/M board, and CP/M 86.
Didn't they see the memo in UK Weekly Personal Computer News?
Apparently they did not, but I can't imagine that this made the program run any smoother, having to support all of these different systems, as well as keep the files compatible between them.
I'm sure it didn't.
No. But it also goes to show, this compatibility between different applications in the same family. It's a growing trend. And finally, also as a side note here, since we're talking about this whole merger of different tools, Byte Magazine has an extensive article on the upcoming Vision GUI, and it looks quite impressive, while the letters page has some scathing reactions to Byte's, quote, one-sided, and, quote, first reactions to the Lisa. The UK's Personal Computer News on June 29th reports that Commodore has shown off the first version of Magic Desk, a GUI-based collection of utility programs for the C64. Yeah.
It's coming.
It's all coming. I mean, Magic Desk will only get the one release, which is a word processor, and there's a couple of other icons on the GUI, which is supposed to be, it looks like a table, like a calculator and stuff that never get implemented. They're just sort of sitting there, the icons. But yeah, I mean, the GUIs are coming. Everybody wants in on this. And now it's just a question of, who's going to have the hardware muscle to pull it off.
Mm-hmm. Pretty much.
And it's probably not going to be the C64, but
no. But Commodore is still feeling the pressure here as they form software division.
Rehired tech veteran Zygmunt Hartmann will man a new software division at Commodore. The company sees a need to provide both hardware and software in the increasingly competitive market and hopes that Hartmann will be able to ensure quality business and application software is available for their systems.
This is actually a pretty amazing thing for Commodore to do, because while to you and me it may be perfectly obvious that you need quality software to support your hardware, Jack Tramiel, coming out of the calculator market, never understood software, never believed in the importance of software, and always pushed hardware without software. So for them to actually form a software division is actually pretty seismic.
Yeah. And the funny thing with this Hartmann guy, he was one of those typical, didn't get along with Jack, left the company, did something else, comes back, basically because of Jack. I mean, it's, the love-hate relationship thing is very, very clear here.
Absolutely.
And they're going to make some interesting tools. They're going to make some interesting software, but it's obviously never going to get them very far. I mean, the Earl's Court show, they actually showed off the Educator, which is a C64 variant housed in a PET box with a monochrome screen and a GUI, which was meant for teachers to have as a teacher workstation in classrooms. But, things like that are more experiments than anything else.
However, Commodore is not the only company that's changing its approach to software as Epix launches Thinker logo.
Epix has launched its new look, emphasizing new CEO and friend of the show Michael Katz's plan to expand the appeal of the company's games beyond traditional computer gamers by combining both action and strategy elements in their games. The company's new logo, the Thinker holding a joystick, will be accompanied by a new artwork style for its covers reminiscent of laser-style effects.
I do find it interesting, and whether it was Michael Katz's marketing approach or the fact that the StarPath people they're about to acquire were just super talented, or a little bit in both categories, Epix was the one somewhat major by the standards of the 1980s, computer game company in the United States that thrived on action titles in a time where the crash had caused just about all the other major computer game companies to back far, far, far away from action titles.
As someone for whom Epix was the premier publisher on the C64 as a kid. I mean, I've talked a lot here about Dynamics and how awesome their output was, but they weren't a publisher. But Epix, there's so many hits from them. Impossible Mission, the game series, Pit Stop, especially Pit Stop 2. I mean, I still play that game all the time. Jumpman. Now, Jumpman predates Katz, I believe, a little bit.
Yeah.
But it comes out right at the time that Michael Katz is coming in. His line of the interactive toy things, which more or less successful, but G.I.Joe is still absolutely brilliant as a game. Don't play the vehicle levels. Just play the 2 characters, 2-player mode, deathmatch with environmental hazards. It's absolutely brilliant.
And don't confuse it with Cobra Strike. Don't confuse it with Cobra Strike.
Yeah. But it is. I mean, granted, I spoke to Michael Katz. The guy is absolutely charismatic with to no end. But I do attribute it to his vision of pure action will not do it. And Epix didn't have, now they did do a lot of budget re-releases of European games like Barbarian and stuff.
Sure.
But they didn't do the straight action game. The straight shooter doesn't happen under his watch. There has to always be some kind of tactical, strategic element to the gameplay. And that really elevated the games. They made them different. They became really puzzles to solve while you're doing also all the cool action. And that's why they thrived. And unfortunately, they're going to also perish because they simply don't leave the C64 soon enough. But that's another issue.
Absolutely.
Yeah. But it's going to be some really good years coming up. There's going to be some good 7 Minutes in Heaven episodes coming up.
Absolutely. And speaking of a little bit of puzzle solving in our computer programs, the Learning Company unveils Discovery Tool Line.
Warren Robinette's co-founded software company dedicated to educational software has announced a new line called Discovery Tools, with a focus on exploration and problem solving. The first 2 titles will be Gertrude's Puzzles and, one of my old-time faves, Rocky's Boots.
Yeah, I mean, I've never played, because it was a little before my time, I've never played Rocky's Boots, but a truly, truly phenomenally inventive educational program. I mean, I've seen plenty of playthroughs of it. I've did oral history with the Smithsonian with Warren Robinette, so very familiar. And it truly is an outstanding program.
As a kid who did not know that those were actual symbols for designing circuits, but I had a photocopied version of the manual. Even though I had an original disc. It was an original disc, but for some reason photocopied manual. And I had that list of all the symbols and just figuring out what they all did. And, moving the cursor around. It's basically a GUI interface. You have this cursor that's a block. You're picking stuff up, moving around, trying to create these electrical circuits and stuff to create essentially Rube Goldberg style effects. Oh, it's such a good game. It's disturbing. And so yeah, that's why I definitely wanted to have a mention of it here. Now, and this goes towards something that we've talked about several times before, and we already mentioned on the show we will be doing more about CES in the coming episodes. But educational software is already previewed to have a huge presence at CES this year, with many companies getting into this increasingly important niche. And we've seen it already with Sierra's getting into it. They picked up Al Lowe's company, and so many others are trying to do. Disney is going to be doing, or started developing, and then somebody else is going to publish it. educational stuff, everybody thinks that is the raison d'etre of home computers, apparently.
And I mean, it could have been, and I mean, this is getting a little far afield of where we are in June 1983, but, there were kind of two schools of educational software. There was the stuff the Learning Company was doing, the stuff that a little bit later Spinnaker Software would be doing, which was, how can we use the unique attributes of the computer to enhance learning? And then there was the Davidson and Associates approach, which was, what if normal drills accept computer? And unfortunately, in the battle for mindshare of parents, older educators, people that were not necessarily on the cutting edge of what computers could do, it was, what if drills accept on computers that won out? And Davidson would be the real winner of that kind of educational space, and the more innovative companies wouldn't get the mind share. But it's somewhat of a shame in my mind that as groundbreaking as it was, that Warren Robinette is far more known for adventure than Rocky's Boots, because not because he shouldn't be known for adventure, but because I would like to see the timeline where Rocky's Boots was the example, the exemplar, the winner in how to do educational software on computers rather than Reader Rabbit.
And I think that, without having done too much research on the topic, it's probably just comes down to development costs. If you're just doing drills, you can make a lot of different copies and versions of Reader Rabbit very, very quickly. Whereas developing innovative concepts, you're not going to be popping them out as quickly, and it's not going to be as easy to put a label of level on each product. Because that was the thing. Reader Rabbit, you had, for this age to this age, for this age to this age. There'd be like 4 boxes on the shelf at any given time.
Yeah, though I should have said Math Blaster is the one I was thinking of. I mean, Reader Rabbit is similar, but Reading Rabbit is another Learning Company product.
Oh, that's right. That's right. But yeah, I know what you mean.
Whereas Math Blaster was Davidson Associates. But yeah, still the same idea. Well, and I did an episode on Spinnaker, which was also trying to be innovative in the space. And I mean, I haven't talked to the founders, but others have. And in their mind, it was easier for educators, like you said, it was easier for educators to wrap their heads around traditional drill-based software. And so that's what won the battle in the mid-'80s for the educational market.
Yeah, it's too bad. Because, you're right. I'd love to have seen that world. I mean, there was so much more you could have done with entertainment software with an educational edge. The Carmen Sandiegos did not need to be the exception rather than the rule.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Meanwhile, of course, with the crash going on around us, we have the continuing shift of the console companies trying to get in on this gold mine as well. And this month we see that Imagic shifts to computers.
While Imagic won't abandon consoles completely, the company will be increasing their R&D into computer development. William Grubb, and I always called it iMagic. It's supposed to be Imagic?
I don't know.
Imagination?
I've always called it Imagic. I don't know. They may call it iMagic. I mean, I've interviewed Bill Grubb, but I can't remember what he called it. But since I still call it Imagic, he probably also called it Imagic. Not to be confused with Wild Bill Steely's iMagic, short for Interactive Magic.
That's true. Okay, we'll call it Imagic.
I think it's Imagic, but don't hold me 100% to that.
No problem. So, William Grubb, Imagic's president, said, quote, "No one adequately anticipated the magnitude of industry changes in the last few months. The merger of video games and home computer industries was seen in the distance, and it's happening now." End quote.
Yeah, and, obviously they're trying to pivot because, they've had an oh shit moment. But, I've talked to Grubb, I've talked to Levy, I've talked to the guys that were in charge in this time. And from their perspective, this isn't just blowing smoke trying to save face. Like, they really did not anticipate a shift of this magnitude this quickly. They were starting to lay the groundwork for expanding into the computer market, but they never thought that the console market was going to burn down around them in the way it did.
Yeah, no, and I can imagine that these must be extremely frantic moments where they're just like, okay, what do we program for? Okay, VIC-20's got a 6502. Okay, how much code can we reuse? Who knows how to write for this thing? Oh, it doesn't have sprites. What the hell do you mean it doesn't have sprites? Yeah.
No, it was a scary time because, you know, those kind of titanic market shifts don't normally happen that fast. Even in the crazy fast-moving world of tech, there's usually somebody that has more advanced warning. And in this case, nobody. Everyone was blindsided at the swiftness of the collapse. And that's what makes the crash so astounding. I mean, in hindsight, it makes sense why it happened, but it's still just mind-blowing how quickly it went from the hottest entertainment category in existence to nothing.
Yeah, it's scary. I mean, as we're seeing this month by month, it's just the evolution of how magazines are treating it, the pricing. You're looking at the ads. It's scary because it literally is just, okay, now we're all playing on, or now it's sell computers and that's it. Move away, consoles going nowhere.
Yeah, pretty much. Though, of course, in the United Kingdom, they never really had much truck with this console stuff anyway, and we're right at the beginning of a soon-to-be flourishing home computer market, and it is in this context that Ultimate Play the Game ads debut.
Psst. And Jetpack are the first two titles to show up in ads for Ultimate Play the Game, either by mail order or at large UK retailers such as Boots or WH Smith.
Beginning of easily the most consequential of all the bedroom coder outfits.
Oh, yeah.
Though they're a little less bedroom coder than some, since the Stampers were, of course, involved in the coin-op industry before they started Ultimate Play the Game.
And that's kind of why they're starting out already with distribution. I mean, that's already a whole different level. I mean, the people who are going to become Ocean are just doing mail order. Most of these guys are just doing mail order. This is the first time I've seen one of these companies just come out of the gate with, oh yeah, we're already in the major retailers. Even I imagine, I don't think was advertising that they were in the retailers' shops in their very first ads. So it's, they're coming in with a certain level of professionalism that is,
and of course they're
be with them.
And of course, they're doing things to a Spectrum that at this early period in the Spectrum's history, no one thought was possible.
Yeah. I mean, Jetpack is going to run quite smoothly, which at this point cannot be said of pretty much anything else on the Spectrum.
Yep. And pretty vibrant graphics for a Spectrum as well. I mean, just, an outstanding level of technical competence, which of course is something they'll extend as they get into their isometric arcade adventures in just another year or two. So
yeah. I mean, there's going to be some great innovation. And for those listeners who don't know, these are the guys who become Rare. So yeah.
And yep, absolutely. And speaking of computer game ads, EA wonders, can a computer make you cry?
After launching their first games last month, the now famous ads focusing on the artists making said games and their ambitions to turn game design into a true art form have hit magazines. Can a computer make you cry?
It's getting there now. I mean, we're getting to the point where games are sophisticated enough in their graphical and audiovisual presentation to generate an emotional response. Certainly an audacious.
I've cried.
Yeah.
Assassin's Creed 3. Assassin's Creed 2 Part 3. There's a moment in that. Now, granted, it was DLC, but there's a moment in that I bawled my eyes out.
But certainly an audacious claim at the time. Of course, those ads were created by Goodby Berlin and Silverstein, famous also for Welcome to the Next Level for Sega, and more generally famous for the Got Milk ad campaign.
Oh, wow. Didn't know about the Got Milk one.
Yep. That's really their biggest claim to fame. It's just the video game people tend to focus on, hey, they did the whole Sega Scream. It's like, yes, and Got Milk.
Yeah, one of those things is probably better known today.
Best one still, years before Hamilton was the one where, the Hamilton aficionado who, they're having the radio contest and, they're asking, who shot Alexander Hamilton, and, he calls in, he's like, because he had a big bite of cookie and can't get any milk. That's still the best for a history nerd like me.
Oh yeah, that was a great one. And now I have that image stuck in my head. Thank you. For a 25-year-old ad, yes.
Absolutely. So yeah, just wonderfully groundbreaking. Of course, those ads don't have quite the impact that Electronic Arts hoped they would. They get a lot more traditional pretty quickly, but certainly an audacious start. And really, it marks the beginning of a period when the computer game industry is beginning to grow up, and the computer game industry is trying to be taken seriously, even if the public at large is not quite ready to take them that seriously yet.
Yeah, I really have to think how much of that is, and this is really, I guess, Trip Hawkins versus Michael Katz. So Hawkins is coming from the world of Apple, coming from this world of, these are sophisticated devices and thinking we're going to do the big sophisticated games. Katz is coming from exactly the opposite side, from the game consoles, from the electronic handhelds, and he's trying to add some of that fascination, some of that more complex stuff to the actiony games he's normally used to, whereas Trip is just going whole hog. We're going to make it even more sophisticated than before, and at a time when everybody who's buying these home computers is basically migrating over from the consoles. And I guess Hard Hat Mac being his number one seller at the beginning is proof of that.
Yeah, well, I mean, Trip Hawkins has had some visionary ideas at times throughout the years, but really what makes Trip and EA so impressive is not his vision, but his ability to pivot and change direction on a dime. It's like, okay, this isn't working. Well, let's give the public what they want. Games like one-on-one basketball and Skyfox, which revived the company after some tough times. Oh, Amiga's not selling? Well, go back to your 6502.
Who can write 6502? Start writing.
We needed to be in video games and didn't get on the ground floor with Nintendo. Well, we'll get on the ground floor with Sega. And it's that pivot even more than the vision that makes EA.
Which makes the 3DO thing that much more interesting, because it's like there could have been a faster pivot with 3DO instead of dumping more of his own cash into the company.
Yeah, absolutely. Though, of course, Trip Hawkins himself managed to pivot, because it's like, 3DO company is not doing well. I hear mobile's about to take off. Yeah. And it's not like Digital Chocolate was ever one of the most important mobile companies, but it provided Trip a good living for a few years.
Oh, that's true. That is definitely true. I mean, and if you read his LinkedIn page, there's been last couple years is all Web3 and what's the NFTs and crap like that. So, but
yep.
Thankfully, that seems to be dead.
Knock on wood till I see a body.
Exactly. So let's get some legal news in here.
Exactly. One single piece of legal news this time around. Midway beats Arctic.
The U.S. Court of Appeals for the Seventh Circuit has ruled that Arctic's speed-up kit for Galaxian is in fact a derivative work and thus violates copyright law. The infringing extends to operators of said sped-up machines as a direct infringer, and those that sell such devices are contributory contributory infringers. This comes as the FBI is stepping up actions against counterfeit machines and even distributing warning stickers to be placed on new machines.
Yep. Very good that the GCC people were offered a development deal by Atari rather than having to finish that out in court, because they'd have probably been in the same circumstance.
Oh, definitely. I mean, I'm not sure if all aspects of this ruling end up remaining good law, but as far as I can tell, this puts an end to the whole speed up kit legal question. Doesn't put an end to speed up kits, but nobody's really going to question whether or not speed up kits are legal anymore for arcade games.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Oh well, it was good while it lasted.
Absolutely. All right, so time to move on to a few transmedia stories here. Beginning with cross-media licensing is the new name of the game.
The licensing frenzy of the 80s is going into full gear. From movies becoming games such as Star Wars, Krull, and MASH, to games such as Pac-Man, Q*bert, and now Dungeons & Dragons becoming cartoons, there is no end to products and entertainment sporting logos from other media. Can we look forward to a Manimal game soon?
No.
No. But, this is a trend that's been picking up steam. And again, the toy retail magazines are all about this. And some of the video game magazines also had articles talking about, this is licensed off of this. The movie licensed games post ET also seem to be getting, an immediate, how could I put this nicely? Some of the reviewers are beginning to already look skeptically at anything that has a license attached to it. I didn't think it would happen this early, but apparently it's already happening this early. We're just around the corner, like we said earlier when we talked about G.I.Joe. I mean, by the fall of '83, we're going to start getting the first cartoons based off of toy lines, and the cross promotion of all this stuff is just going to go insane. And it's the
exactly. And it's not surprising that it's in the toy trades that this kind of debate is playing out, because the toy industry has always had this weird love-hate relationship with licenses, because for a long time they had tried to develop successful licenses on what other media franchises there were, such as Star Trek and James Bond, and they'd always had very mixed success, and more on the poor side than the good side. But then, Star Wars came along and kind of redefined an ability to license and have huge success, and then ET came along and once again swung that pendulum in the other direction, because it wasn't just the video game. There was underwhelming performance in general of ET merchandise. I mean, some of it did very well, obviously, but not as well as anyone expected. And so you're finding the toy companies now, well, if licenses are so hit and miss, let's forget about licenses. Let's generate our own transmedia material. Let's do our own comic books, our own cartoons, and use that as a way to create the same kind of buzz around a property that you get from a license, but a little more in our control. And so, as these kind of debates are going on in video games and in console games, I mean, there's really a bigger kind of back and forth going on in the toy industry, which is why these mags, I think, are picking up on it more than the video game mags are.
Oh, definitely. And it's going to be interesting just to see how this evolves. I mean, obviously we live in a world nowadays where, it's Marvel is everything, every possible product has a Marvel tie-in logo. I mean, hell, I'm looking at one of those. What was the Disney figure-based video game thing again? The one.
Infinity, right? Disney
Infinity, yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm looking at a Nick Fury Infinity figure right now on my shelf, even though I've never played the game, but
right.
It's one of those weird, stupid concepts that just, it's insane. But it wasn't the world really of the 70s, but it will become the world of the 80s and the world we still live in today.
Absolutely. And speaking of licensing, Video Game Serial is coming.
Oh, yeah. You know you've arrived when. So, Donkey Kong and Pac-Man are about to get the breakfast cereal treatment. General Mills will be making Pac-Man, and Ralston Purina will be bringing Donkey Kong to the cereal bowls of the nation.
And, of course, we have to remember here from the conglomerizing days that General Mills is the parent company of Parker Brothers at this time.
Oh.
So it's no surprise that they would be one of the cereal companies leading the charge here into this cross-licensing with video games.
Makes perfect sense. I mean, they've got the stats to know which characters are popular. And yeah, it's just crazy. I remember these coming out, and I mean, just everything got a cereal. For Return of the Jedi, there was C-3POs, which were basically just circles. But, they put C-3PO on the box, and people will buy the crap. Oh, well.
Yeah, of course, there'd be another round of cereal craze when the Nintendo Entertainment System becomes big in the late 80s. But
we've covered that on the show with the Nintendo cereal system. Yes, yeah. we have covered that. We covered that, I think, last year for the 30-year jump.
But I think that's about the last gasp. I mean, I'm not saying that definitively. There could have been some other cereal tie-in later, but it feels like serial tie-ins kind of tapped out at the end of the beginning of the 90s, and doesn't really happen anymore.
No, I think it was also that whole movement against the super sugary cereals.
Right. That's what I'm thinking.
Finally took off. That people were like, no, maybe it's the kids are all obese. Why are they obese? Oh yeah, let's start with the cereals.
Pretty much.
And still Captain Crunch survives. Okay, yeah, moving on.
But moving on, yes. Moving on from the licensing craze, time for some magazines, Commodore User debuts.
The UK Commodore-centric mag Commodore User has debuted. The first issue is primarily focused on business applications and programming with little about games. The mag will survive well into the 90s, ultimately ending as CU Amiga.
Just another reminder there that, the way you spelled IBM in much of Europe in that period was Commodore. In Germany and the UK, they had quite a share of the business market.
Oh, definitely. I mean, and we can't forget that at this point in time, Commodore is still pushing the 64, or at least was a few months before this, primarily as a business machine. The VIC-20 was supposed to be the home machine for games. The C64 was supposed to be your business machine. And that in their ads, we talked about it when they're comparing the price of the ads. They're comparing it with the IBM PC that also has 64K of RAM. I mean, the XTs have just started to trickle out onto the market. And so it makes sense that the Commodore 64 could be that replacement. I mean, if they had Geos at that point, it definitely would have, but that's, still many years down the road.
Absolutely. And meanwhile, Newsroom Artist gets comics published in Creative Computing.
Yeah, this is more of a public service announcement to everybody, or more like a public service request on my part. I'm trying to figure out who the artist was who did the artwork for Springboard's Newsroom software. Several of his strips, all drawn by the looks of it using the Newsroom editor or a very similar pixel tool, appear in this month's Creative Computing magazine. He also signed them with his initials KV. And in the original Newsroom, for those who didn't use Newsroom, it was a simplified, easy to use desktop publishing software for the Apple II, C64, IBM PC. I used it extensively as a kid on my C64. It was where I first really started using graphics and stuff. And also in the logo for this show, the word newsroom is a recreation of the title screen for Newsroom. And the artwork in it is this very cartoony style for the most part in the artwork discs that came with the program and other ones that you could buy additionally. Very unique style, very distinctive cartoon style for the characters. And I've always wondered who this guy was. He's not listed in the manual. And so if anybody knows who KV is, please let me know, because I truly want to track this guy down and find out what else he did or she did.
Or she, yeah.
Yeah. It's just very, very cool artwork.
Absolutely. And I mean, Newsroom was a huge seller. I think it's largely been overshadowed and forgotten today because the Mac came along and kind of redefined the public perception of what desktop publishing was. Which is kind of retrospectively caused Springboard stuff to kind of fade into the background. But it was hugely selling software, very successful.
Oh, yeah. And it was so easy to use. And that was basically, I mean, Rocky's boots before it, but that was my first real feeling of a GUI, because you clicked on stuff to activate different options and so forth. It was so easy to use, so fun to use. It gave me a whole purpose in having a printer. I never knew why I had a printer before that. And it's just absolutely brilliant piece of software for the time. And that guy's artwork was a major aspect of using that software. And I just love to know. And I keep saying guy, that's wrong. I mean, this person, right. I don't know who it was, but if anybody knows, please let me know. Okay, moving on.
And absolutely, we've got a couple of big movies coming this month with semi-video game tie-ins. First of all, War Games premieres.
Matthew Broderick's battle against a government computer to prevent thermonuclear war premiered on June 3rd.
I like War Games. It's a fun movie.
I love it. I've seen it countless times. I did not see it in the theater back in the day.
Yeah, I was too young.
Yeah, I was too young for that movie too. But subsequently, over the years, on VHS again and again and again. So, and it really did sell this idea of, okay, what does it mean to own a computer? Number one, he's not a super geeky guy. He's kind of a cool kid, but he's got the computer. The idea of a modem, the idea of logging in and, hacking. For, I think most people, that was their first real imagery for those things. And obviously it's not super realistic the way it's portrayed, but it feels realistic enough that these concepts, I think, become very mainstream very quickly. Through this movie.
And there's a good depiction of kind of a strip mall kind of arcade there, just for a second, for you social historians,
of course,
out there, there's a nice brief arcade scene.
That's true. That is true. I mean, if you're a computer geek, you're also playing games.
Absolutely. And getting a little bit more dystopian, Blade Runner premieres.
On June 25th, Ridley Scott's sci-fi masterpiece Blade Runner premiered. It was all dark, humid, and very awesome.
But on June 25th, it also had a happy ending.
This is very
taken
true.
From unused footage from The Shining.
This is very true. The car driving off into the distance in a non-destroyed outer world outside the city. Yeah. Now, I did not see this in the theaters, but thanks to lax parental supervision and Showtime, I watched this movie many, many times in the year or so afterwards. And I did see that version over and over again, which made watching the director's cut years later a little awkward, a little weird. I don't know why the narration was gone. Why is the narration gone? There's supposed to be narration at the beginning. But, oh well.
Because it was never supposed to be there. The studio forced him to do that.
I know. But I sort of, at least on that point, I stand with Guillermo del Toro, who says, you will have to claw my Laserdisc version of Blade Runner from my cold, dead hands, because he is also a big fan of the narration at the beginning. So
Now he's Mexican, so he would be Guillermo, wouldn't he? He would not be Guillermo.
Guillermo.
Yeah, since he's Mexican and not Argentinian.
Is he Mexican or Spanish?
Pretty sure he's Mexican, isn't
he? Guillermo del Toro? That is a good question, because I keep thinking, but maybe I'm just thinking...
Mexican filmmaker.
I keep thinking because of Pan's Labyrinth and the connection with Spain, I keep thinking it's Spanish. But, okay, yeah, Mexican.
Yeah, no.
Then it would be more like... I gotta get into the Mexican accent. Guillermo del Toro, something like that. Yeah, it's throwing in the Mexican accent as best as I can, but it's been a long time since I tried to pull that off. Okay.
Yeah. Now we do have to talk real briefly because we have to talk briefly because this came up in our talk with Ethan. You were disappointed in the Blade Runner sequel.
Oh yes, I thought it was bad. Just plain bad. And here's why. We've got the world moving forward. But as far as the world building is concerned, so if you, in the original movie, there's really, at least in my understanding of the movie, there was this constant feeling that we were watching the final days of Earth. If you didn't get out to the colonies, everybody there is basically, maybe not in a year or two, but there was no future there. So now we're jumping forward and nothing has changed as far as the quality of life of the people in the cities. There's no additional, scarcity of food or anything. Apparently everything is just moving on. But the tech has gotten cleaner, if you will. It doesn't feel as grimy and gritty as the original. I mean, when you go into his apartment, the main character's apartment, it doesn't have that feeling of I've just given up, which is the general feel that you get from Decker's apartment, for example. And so that. I didn't understand. There was no feeling of an explanation for that for me. I got nothing from Jared Leto's character. I didn't understand what his motivation was. He was
never get anything from Jared Leto's characters.
Yeah, I mean, he was just there. With Tyrell, I understood. I could understand, this idea of building stuff just because you could build it. Cool. He's driven by the technology. That's why, he's playing chess with the engineer. He's, doing all of these things. He's living this fairly opulent life, but at his core, he's still a nerd. Just, oh, look how cool this new replicant is that we made, who doesn't even know she's a replicant,
Right.
But with Jared Leto, I have no idea. Is he just a CEO? What's his motivation? He's just there to look atmospheric and surreal. And then we have to bring Decker back in. Why the frag what was the story point of Decker? Other than we need to bring in the old actor again because it's a sequel. No,
right.
Just have the balls of saying we're living off the world. So for me, it failed on all those different levels of I didn't understand how the world has changed from the previous film. I didn't understand why the hell Decker had to come back. I didn't understand what Jared Leto's, why did they recreate Rachel? What was the point of that other than...
And then with Edward James Olmos's character, they didn't even try to make it
Edward James Olmos's old character. It was just Edward James Olmos sitting in the room. Like it didn't feel like the character that he played in the original. It felt like we sat down Edward James Olmos for an interview about Blade Runner.
The deal is, and I can't remember who explained this. But the idea with sci-fi is you have this foreign world, this world that you're going to have to explain to the viewer, so that the decisions the characters make inside this world make sense. Mm-hmm. So you have to spend a lot of time in a sci-fi or fantasy world establishing or explaining the world to the viewer. And that way, then, the decisions people make in that world make sense. If you're doing something in the real world where everybody knows what everything is, that doesn't happen. So the complexity of your story in a real-world setting can be more complex. The complexity of your story in a fantasy setting has to be simplified in order to have enough time to build the story. Now, a sci-fi sequel theoretically has the advantage where you can get the story more complex because you've already established the world. Right. You don't have to necessarily do all of that. Now, granted, if you're doing the sequel 35 years later, you kind of lose a little bit of that edge. Because you're going to have to appeal to a bunch of people who don't have that requisite knowledge. But at the same time, if the world is dictating the people's actions, and that has to be important, because if the people are going to be doing all the same decisions modern people would do, what's the purpose of the sci-fi setting? You want the sci-fi setting to be giving the characters a different set of options than characters in our world would have, and different motivations for doing the things that they do than in our world. Otherwise, just put it in our world. And I think that is where the movie failed, because there was never a feeling of peril to the environmental catastrophe there. There was never a feeling of peril of why is it problematic that the androids are walking among us? Mm-hmm. There was never this feeling of, why? What was the problem? And I understood it with the first one. With the first one, it was, we're using these robots as slaves out in the void. We don't want them coming back here vengeful or whatever else. They're tools. They're not supposed to be making decisions for themselves. If they're making decisions for themselves, that's a dangerous flaw in our system. And so this is why we have to hunt them down. At the same time, we have the technology enthusiast, multi-billionaire industrialist who doesn't care long-term what the consequences are as long as it looks cool. And so those are conflicting motivations, and it created this very interesting set of moral dilemmas that we don't have to face in our real world in that sense, especially in 1983. But were well explained inside the setting of the movie that you could follow it, that you felt the drama. And that gave that impact to that final speech in the original Blade Runner. And the new Blade Runner had none of that. It was a couple of really pretty pictures, and I'm like, dude, if I want that, I'll just surf the web and look at some pretty pictures. I got nothing out of the movie. So that was my problem with Blade Runner 2.
Yeah, and it's going to really pain you to hear me say this, but I thought there was something a little off here. Blade Runner's a 1982 movie, Carl.
Oh no, I got the wrong year? I got the wrong year for Blade Runner? Oh no.
Yes, I thought it was an 82 movie, and so I was like,
oh my goodness.
Really look at this.
Oh, it is June 25th of 1982. So we basically did this entire Blade Runner nonsense, and I got the date wrong. Oh, that sucks. That sucks. I am so sorry, everybody. Yeah, so congratulations. You've just heard my tirade about Blade Runner 2049 for no reason whatsoever related to this show.
But it was a very good tirade.
Okay. Yeah, sorry, everybody. Yes, okay. But War Games did come out, right? Please tell me I got that one right.
That is a 1983 movie.
Okay,
yes.
Good. Okay. And you know what? We probably actually talked about Blade Runner last year in our June episode. I don't know why I screwed that up. Okay. See, even I can make mistakes. Yeah, okay, we have a Department of Corrections. Everybody knows I make mistakes. Okay. Let's move on.
The DOC is going to be salivating through this whole thing and then be very disappointed when I call you out in the end.
Yeah, sometimes I see him adding the notes in real time on our Discord chat. And so, yeah, this will be fun. Hi, Ethan.
But moving on to some honors as Uncle Clive becomes Sir Clive.
Oh, nice one. Sir Clive Sinclair of Specky fame has been granted a knighthood.
Yep, I mean, there's an agenda going on here a little bit. I mean, the monarchy is apolitical, so I mean, it's not like Thatcher is telling the monarchy what to do here, but I don't think it's a coincidence that the Thatcher government, a government that Elizabeth II was apparently somewhat impressed with, is making this big push into computers and technology being part of the future of Britain, and Sir Clive, after all of his low-cost computers, suddenly getting himself a knighthood. I imagine there has to be a link, even though obviously it's not an overt link because the monarchy is not allowed to be political in that way.
Exactly. And I mean, he's also been siding with the more liberal, economically liberal policies of the Thatcher regime. We've talked a few months ago about how the other computer makers in England wanted a moratorium on imports of foreign computers, and he was the only one saying, no tariffs, no nothing. We need to keep it open because, of course, he's selling through Timex, his machine, in other countries and stuff, whereas, nobody's buying a Dragon 32 outside of England at this point, or at any point, really. So, yeah. And, no, his knighthood, is big press. It's good press, especially for the computer industry. And yeah, this movement to try to get England computerized and is ultimately it's a really, I mean, for all the terrible things the Thatcher administration did, this is probably one of the few bright spots.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Yeah. So, and we'll wait a couple more years for Alan Sugar to get it.
Well, and of course, he does one better because he is Lord Sugar these days. I mean, the knighthood comes first, obviously. The knighthood comes first. He was Sir Alan first, but he is now Lord Sugar.
This is true. It's true. Yeah,
because he was actually a wildly successful business person, unlike Clive, who has his ups and downs and occasional explosions.
C5. Okay.
And finally, this is another one of our early 1980s episodes. It is another one of our episodes where the crash is in full swing, which means we must end on what is for the moment our monthly tradition of bidding a very fond farewell to another company foolish enough to jump into the video game space. In this case, we say RIP to Zymag.
Zymag has decided to give up their dreams of making games and has instead returned to their core business of making blank video and audio tapes. The dramatic changes in the video game market, including the increase in advertising expenditures necessary to move product, have driven the company's decision.
That was a good move, guys. Not the time to be getting in with your also ran nonsense.
Yeah. I mean, I think they only released 1 or 2 games, and now they're out. They're just like, you know what? We've got a day job. We're doing all right.
Screw you guys. I'm going home.
Yeah, and that's good. That's good. So, okay, we have gone through all of these stories. We are done with the time jump. There's only one order of business left. Sir, what is the word of the episode?
Merchandising. Got a lot of talk about licenses this time around.
That's true. That's
here
true.
And there, and licensed properties, and defending licenses through hunting down pirates as well. So, you know,
I'll dig it. Okay, so merchandising is the word of the episode. I love it. Okay, Alex, remind our kind listeners where they can find your fine work.
As always, our main website is theycreateworlds.com, and from there you can get to the podcast that myself and my co-host Jeffrey Dahm do twice a month every month without fail since 2015, also called They Create Worlds. You can also find it directly at podcast.theycreateworlds.com. It is also available from all the major podcast sites, Spotify, iTunes, etc. Then there is the book, which will theoretically get a volume 2 one of these days. They Create Worlds, the story of the people and companies that shape the video game industry, volume 1. Probably should have put an untold story of the people and companies that shape the video game industry, just to, drive more of those marketing volume. People love it when you say it's untold, but oh well, missed opportunities. That book is available directly from the publisher, CRC Press, as well as major online retailers.
Excellent. Remember, everybody, links to all that stuff in the show notes, and links also to everything for this show. Join the Patreon, check out the videos in case you thought that Cobra Strike couldn't possibly be as bad as we're talking about. Trust me, it is, and you can see that for just $1 a month. With that being said, everybody, have fun. I finally saw Dune. I finally saw the new.
Oh, it's so good! It's so good.
It's disturbingly good.
I can't wait for
so
part 2.
Disturbingly good. You know what? I went in with the lowest possible fucking expectations.
He kept complaining every single time that I was trying to tell him this is a good movie.
But it's Denis, who is amazing, and the cast was amazing. I knew going in I was probably going to enjoy.
As a person who really, really, really was disappointed by the Blade Runner sequel, I was an extreme skeptic going into this. But yeah, I mean, if I had to level any complaint, they did a poor job establishing the different roles in the hierarchy of Duncan and Gurney. That was the one thing I walked away from, where it was like, wait, why do you have 2 guys in charge of training the army? What's the different roles of them? That was the one thing that made a lot more sense in the original film version. But other than that, I mean, yeah, it's now I don't know how much was missing for an outside viewer as opposed to somebody who's dyed in the wool in this
I've never read Dune. I can tell you that.
Oh, really? Okay, that's good.
Yeah, I think it was probably coherent. I mean, I would have liked, there won't be a longer cut because Denis says there is no such thing as director's cut. I gave you my director's cut. I do not do the deleted scenes. But I mean, he did film more. Like, I would love to see an extended cut of it with some of the things he left out, because there's so much intricacy in Dune. But I don't think we ever will, or not unless not unless we outlive Denis, and then Warner Brothers needs to make a buck.
Well, Warner Brothers needs to make a lot of bucks right now.
Yeah, that's true. So
I would
or
not
maybe
be
we'll
surprised.
or maybe we'll get the Alan Smithy cut.
No.
Second time.
Exactly.
No, what we're gonna get this time is the Dune saga.
Uh-huh.
Just like Godfather.
I mean, they're
saga.
trying to do an extended universe.
Hey, there's a
thing with
reference.
that too, so.
Yeah, no, I understood that reference. Yeah, because there is stuff he left on the cutting room floor that would have been fascinating to see. But I do think it holds. I mean, the plot is pretty straightforward in it. Which, when you say that about the plot of Dune, that's doing a very good job.
Well, I mean,
no, I love Dune. It doesn't have a straightforward plot.
for me, the money shot, the thing I never thought I'd see on film, was a very quick scene where they show all the Fremen sitting there reading the Catholic Orange Bible.
Yeah.
Oh my God! It was the closest thing to a nerdgasm I've probably had in years.
And they actually they filmed the scene where Yui gives Paul a Catholic Orange Bible, which is from the book. But they filmed that scene, but that's one of the ones that did not make it in.
I would have loved to see that. I mean, because that's the one thing. It's like, if you don't know the story of Dune, they never mentioned the word mentat, for example, which kind of weirded me out because it's like, why and what's the deal and, where are the computers, for example, and stuff. But no, loved it. It was great. Now I'm just waiting for part 2.
And now we're going to have, as the Emperor of the universe, Christopher Walken.
He's the closest thing to Jodorowsky's choice of Dali, okay? I am sorry, but if he shows up sitting on a toilet, I will be happy.
I have a fever, and the only cure is more melange.
You want to marry my daughter?
I had this spice up my ass for 20 years.
No, I think he'll be awesome. It's just because he is a great actor. He's just such a caricature too. But the new he appears a couple times in the new trailer that just came out, and he looks suitably
I'm not looking
intense.
at no trailers.
No, me neither.
I just going in.
But I did hear that he was in it, and I was like, okay, I'm sold. I need to see this movie now. That's all there is to it.
By the way, listeners, if Carl happens to put this out as a little extra, then just know that this was not planned whatsoever.
No, this is just happening at way too late a time at night. Okay. Okay, guys, so let's get this party started.